Well, Happy New Year, Reston. Thank you guys all for coming out. I can see that we need to find some more hobbies for some more people out there. So anyway, welcome to the board meeting, our first one in 2018. I want to start off with a really good news item for Reston, is that we have an Olympian coming out of Reston, Virginia. And I'm going to ask Sridhar to say her name.
OBrien.
Because I will butcher it. So a 17-year-old young lady is going to be representing the US of A in our Olympic Games as a speed skater. So yay, Reston has our own Olympian. So everybody be. So maybe we should get the Reston banner. Maybe.
American speed skater.
Women's speed skater, yes. First African American. I do want to, and we can get this to when we get to the minutes, but I want to let the association know that new minutes from last board meeting have been posted. We found a couple errors in that, so we have posted new set of minutes, and we can go over, maybe we can do it just quickly right now. There's only a couple different changes. One, we marked, we used the wrong numbers in one of the legislative bills. It was we put 733, it was actually 722.
That's not in the minutes, that's going to be
on the agenda.
Part of one of those
Okay.
motions that we take later.
We did have a motion on page 2 of the minutes. The motion, the writing in the minutes said that the motion had passed, and actually the motion had failed. And there was one other, Julie, you caught one other thing?
Just in the resolution.
It was an extra, like,
There was a line
No.
that was blank that, yeah. So
I think that was it, right, Kate?
The most important one, I was there twice.
Yes.
We can't have you there twice, for sure. We cannot have two John Bowmans, no.
Stop cloning.
Yeah. So those were just some updates. The new minutes, I believe, have already been posted, so if you wanted to print out the accurate minutes, they are there. I think that's all I have for opening comments. By the way, I guess I should have said meeting is called to order. Meeting is called to order. Quorum has been set. So with that, I know that this board has reviewed the packet because we were feeding Kate all these things over the last day or two. So thank you all for coming all prepared. That's awesome. So with that, can we have a motion to approve our
I move to
agenda.
approve the...
Second.
Any objections?
Oh.
No.
Okay, without objection, Kate. Then we're on to the consent calendar. Any, we have
I move to approve.
I second.
any objections?
I'd like to, I think we have in the consent calendar to appoint John Pinkman as a PRAC committee member. I think we should take that off the table and consider that after the elections.
Do you want to remove it from consent calendar?
Remove it from the consent calendar
it's a
so we can talk
modification
about
to
it
the
during
I agree to that.
Okay, so now the motion is we will approve the consent calendar with the removal of the committee volunteer appointment.
Yep. Okay.
You second that, Mike? You good with
second
that? Any objections to that?
Oh, no, that sounds good.
Okay. Were there any objections? No? We're all good?
No.
Everybody's, okay.
Everybody's good.
Okay, Helping Homes. I already got to meet one of our heroes in the community earlier. So Anna?
Thank you, Sherry. I'm Anna Varane. This is Vanessa Tucker, who works on the Helping Homes project with me in the governance department. Helping Homes, for those of you who may not be familiar, is a Reston Association community service project that helps homeowners with exterior home repairs. For those individuals who may be elderly, financially challenged, or very ill, and do not have the resources to make those repairs through their own resources. So through this project, it assists the homeowners to maintain their homes, and in turn it also helps the neighborhood to have the homes maintained and upkeep the neighborhood. So to date, we started this project in late 2015, and to date we have helped, we've had 6 projects, and in 2017 we completed 2 projects with the help of 3 contractors. alongside our own Reston Association CSF team, who was a big help to us as well. So for this year, for 2017, we are recognizing HP Home Services, American Cowboy Roofing, Bartlett Tree Experts, and again, our ACSF team. Unfortunately, we just found out that 2 of our partner contractors were ill today. I think everybody's getting the flu. So, but we do have Eric Major here today. He represents HP Home Services, and he's been a very committed, dedicated partner. He is also on our Helping Homes committee, but he's also been very committed to several of our projects. He's actually participated in all of our projects to date. So we're very, very, sincerely grateful to your commitment to the project, because it's made a huge difference in the community. So we want to recognize you tonight.
And Eric, could you just share with us what type of work you do?
We are a Class A general contractor. We do just about everything inside and out. But for
Okay.
the purpose of this, it's windows, doors, siding, trim.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
And Eric does a lot of work here in Reston. So he's established quite the clientele in Reston, so he's very well trusted with many of the homeowners in Reston. So we appreciated the relationship building that's done with
Yeah.
many of the homeowners.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric.
Anna, could you name off those contractors again? I think you went really fast.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I want Restonians to hear and know who they are.
Yes, I'm sorry. So American Cowboy Roofing, and Cindy Price is the owner of American Cowboy Roofing. She also sits on the committee. Eric Major, again, with HP Home Services. Bartlett Tree Experts, Taylor Duke is the arborist that also sits on the committee. And for 2017, also the Reston Association Central Services Facility team assisted with one of the projects that we completed, so they were very helpful.
So I think a round of applause for all those contractors. And Anna, to your team for kind of honchoing all this for those folks that need the help. It's an awesome program that we have here at RA, so thank you.
We're very proud of the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have another good news story. Jessica Ziegler.
Good evening. My name is Jessica Ziegler, and I am the chairperson for MTAC, the Multimodal Transportation Advisory Committee, and I also have with me committee members Dan Cole and Craig Clark, who have been instrumental in us getting this Bicycle Friendly Communities award. So I'm just going to give you just a brief overview, and then I guess we'll present you with the award. Bicycle Friendly America is a program run by the League of American Bicyclists. The program is a tool for states, communities, businesses, and universities to provide a roadmap and formal method of recommendation or recognition for communities that make exemplary efforts to make bicycling a real transportation and recreation option for all community members. Each year, the League accepts applications from communities across the country and issues awards based on the community's satisfaction of the 5 E's: engineering, education, encouragement, enforcement, and evaluation and planning. Communities that receive this award are issued a bronze, silver, gold, or platinum level achievement based on their scoring within the categories of the 5 E's. MTAC submitted the Bicycle Friendly Community application on behalf of Reston Association and the entire community of Reston. For the second time, Reston achieved a bronze level recognition. Reston will maintain its bicycle friendly community status through the year 2021, and MTAC hopes to continue its advocacy, programming, and infrastructure improvements will lead us to reaching a silver or gold level status in that year of 2021. So we're very happy to present this to Reston Association, and we look forward to all of your support as we continue to strive to move on up that ladder. So
So much.
thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have to say, I'm really happy to see this happen. And it's really a great thing, the second time in a row, but also say how inspiring it's been to watch Dan Cole move this along.
Absolutely.
He's taken incredible detail and work for this, just amazing hours, and he just does because he thinks it's the right thing to do. It's great to have people like Ryan.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Ready? Ready? Go ahead. All right, ready? 1, 2. One more. Last one. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, the meeting's over. We got an award.
All right. Let's celebrate.
Yay. Okay, so we are running a little early. Before we get to member comments, I did want to just give you a little update. A group of Restonians yesterday met with Supervisor Hudgens and members of the Fairfax County staff to again talk about the zoning amendments and the PRC, and that it was about almost a 2-hour meeting. We have asked that March meeting date that's been scheduled for the hearing of the zoning amendment. Kate, you correct me if I go astray. We've asked for that to get pushed because we still think there's work to do. These Reston community groups, our CPR group, which is Dennis Hayes was there, and Bruce Ramo and Lynn Malston. We did chat about the density. We chatted about the road to nowhere, on across Hidden Creek, and so we're waiting now. We're waiting to see if they're going to push the date. We've certainly asked for it. There was definitely no one could have ever thought that that's not what we wanted leaving that meeting. I will tell you that Mr. Carter was there, and he spoke at the very end, and he was encouraging. He was encouraging. So I just wanted to let the community know that that is an ongoing effort with Reston Association as well as the community, the group called CPR, which many of you have heard about. I just want to let you know that that's still working. So we're still working on it.
Madam President,
Yes, sir.
for those watching who don't know who Mr. Carter is, he's our new representative on the Planning and Zoning Commission.
He's the planning commissioner for Hunter.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Okay, I just wanted to say that. I should have said that in opening comments, but, I'm getting old, so I forget things. Okay. So, member comments. I have a couple of folks that have signed up. Jeremy Novak. Karen, did you want to go first?
I would love to.
Okay, sorry. She was typed in, so I didn't even see it.
This won't take long.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Just an administrative task here. I'm Karen Anton, Chair of the Elections Committee. I think you're all familiar from last November going over the resolutions. Resolution 3, Elections and Referenda Resolution 3, Campaign Rules and Standards of Conduct. We're about to kick off the campaign cycle. You should have in front of you a copy of the resolution and the statement that requires your signature. If you are already familiar with the resolution tonight, please sign the statement and give it to Kate. If not, you can review it and email it to the Elections Committee. Tomorrow, if possible, we are certifying candidates Monday night, so we would like to have this as soon as possible. Of particular relevance to the board as an RA party, as outlined in the resolution numbers 4 and 6. The committee has been asked if a board member is allowed to campaign for a candidate. The answer to that is yes, there is nothing to prohibit that. That said, we would urge you, if you are going to campaign for a candidate, to please make it perfectly clear in everything that you say and do that you are taking the position as an individual RA member and not as a board director, so that there is no way, either directly or indirectly, that it can be given, the impression can be given that you are representing the board or RA, or that the board or RA endorses any particular candidate. But there's nothing to prohibit you from campaigning.
Okay. Can I ask a couple of questions?
That's a change from what has been the past behavior. I don't believe it is.
My recollection had been that board members could not
I think there have been some opinions in the past that that was true, but I don't think it was true.
Yeah. There is nothing, and it's been confirmed by legal counsel that there is nothing in the resolutions that prohibits that. But we, as I would strongly urge that it be done, you do that as an individual and not as a board member, so that there's no way that any impression of impropriety can be given.
Question. So was this, did this happen because of the November 16th amendment? Was this added after that or during that amendment, or has it been in place for a while?
It's been in this resolution?
No, not the resolution. The request that the
statement?
board officers sign.
No,
The board signs.
Yeah, it's been in place for a while. It's required to be signed by its RA parties, which includes board, elections committee members, the CEO, directors of, departmental directors of RA, and board directors.
So they've always signed it, okay. Okay. Second question, this one says, 12 says after the certification of the candidates, not before. So I mean, I have no problem signing it.
That's
but I'm
going to
just
happen
curious.
Monday night, yeah.
Just
I mean,
curious with the timing.
the candidates, once they're certified, will have to sign that.
Right.
The elections committee members have already signed it. There's nothing to preclude you from signing it before Monday night, but
I
if you
understand.
prefer not to, that's okay.
No,
But
I'm just saying that it doesn't seem to be a requirement according to 12, that's all, 12A. But that's fine.
you're referring to 12A?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it says after, not before.
Once certified
Because
the elections
I took your
committee.
comment.
Well, I think that's referencing the candidate and not the other RA parties, but.
Okay, good, thank you.
Any other questions?
Sign another one next week, because I already signed it.
One is good, two must be better.
That's a good question. I'll find out if you need to sign two.
You want to weigh in on that,
I
sir?
think if you sign one, it's effective for each of the
I would think
boards.
so.
Okay.
All right, good.
Any other questions? Thanks, Karen.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Hey, Jeremy, once again. Yep. So remember, if you could give us your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Yeah. My name is Jeremy Novak. I lived in Reston, my home at 2005 Halyard Lane on Lake Thoreau for over 38 years. I intend to remain in my house for the next 30 years. I hereby petition the Reston Board of Directors for relief from overzealous and unwanted enforcement of the watershed management edicts. Reston staff seems to be focused a lot on process and not unwilling to be involved in solving the problem. A little over a year ago, the Reston Association watershed manager decided that the floating dock anchored behind my house on my bulkhead for over 30 years was no longer a dock. This dock and my boat are shown on the submittal I just gave with a historic photograph from 1990 to show that it's been there since then. Since that time, there has been no reasonable conversation about solving my problem. The Watershed Management Covenants Committee have required changes to my dock and others that won't meet the requirements of the changing lake. The lakes in Reston rise at least 3 feet because of storms, or lower over 3 feet because of lack of rain, dredging, or dam inspection. This winter, as it was last week, the lakes freeze and create enormous lateral forces on our dock. The floating dock I have secured to my property has worked perfectly for over 30 years. Unfortunately, the Reston watershed flotation dock requirements don't work. Since being cited by Reston, there has been no meaningful conversation with staff. The Reston Association staff speaks through directives and committee meetings with artificial time limits, preventing staff from understanding the changing lake and the dock requirements. I was sent a citation by the Covenants Committee when I was on vacation, so when I returned and signed for the registered letter, staff said it was too late to appeal the decision. RA seems to only care about when the letter was sent out and has no regard for whether I received it at all. When I requested information a month ago, I received no reply. When I visited the Reston Association office 10 days ago, staff was on the phone and would not talk to me and has not returned my call yet. Again, I received an email stating I would be contacted shortly. 9 days ago, I've not been contacted. The attached letter of January 10th states that to call members to meet with the board and have questions and meet with the board and for questions. Teresa Filbert, although I went to the Reston office and left 3 copies of the letter, I've had no response. This morning, I finally received a response from your attorney, Ken Cheswick, which didn't answer any of the questions that I left for the Reston office. Despite all this conflict, I've had a legal agreement with Reston for many years stating my home meets all the Reston covenant requirements, which has been just totally ignored. Previously, I had a meeting with staff. Kate Fulkerson would not discuss the issue, but assured me that the best way to discuss my case was with the legal committee. This seems to have been a ruse. It seems there is no time limit to deal with members. There's no time to deal with members concerned, but plenty of time to build an adversarial legal committee action. Veiled threats, as shown on the January 10th letter, which I gave you a copy of it, makes it appear that my decision has already been made. It also seems Reston staff has no intention of not responding to me and has hired an outside law firm intentionally running up a legal bill. Just about over, as shown on the Reston document, governance core values for service state that they would treat each person as an individual with dignity and respect, be more responsive than the members would expect, and handle issues with courtesy and genuine desire to help. I have received no core value considerations. I again ask you for your help and consideration to solve this matter and not extend it to a court process. There are not 2 boats on my property. I have a boat and a 30-year-old dog. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've left a copy of the letters.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Joe Layton? Thank you.
Joe?
I'm Joe Layton, and I live at 2033 Approach Lane in Reston, Virginia. And I was a Reston Association board member for 13 years, and I was secretary of the Reston Association board for 4 years. Reston Association should have a 3-member planning and evaluation committee. They had one when I first joined the board. One of the duties would be to approve the compensation of senior managers as part of the CEO evaluation. In other words, they would look at the review of senior manager A and say great and approve the salary. They would look at the evaluation of senior manager B and say great and approve. They would ask about senior manager C. The CEO would say there is no report, and the committee would tell the CEO that a report has to be written before the compensation is approved. The main purpose of this is to have the committee approve the compensation to make sure the CEO writes an evaluation of all senior managers. That's something to have in place. Kate could be hit by a bus tomorrow and get someone else as CEO, so that's why it's important to have that. And that at the beginning of each action item, board members should make the disclosures. That's like the county, that's like they do at the county board. Each supervisor, the chair asks them if they have any disclosures, and then the supervisor makes a disclosure. For example, if the board has an action item on the EFG accounting firm, and the EFG accounting firm prepared the tax return for a board member, that board member should disclose that the CPA firm prepared a tax return for me. And back in the 1990s, RA had an in-house counselor. After she left, the board had decided not to hire an in-house counselor. And I think the current board should find out why. I mean, I don't know why. I heard from rumors that is that they had to spend too much money on outside counsel when she was there. But I don't know whether that's true or not, because that predated me on the board. And then also, will Kensington residents be members of the Reston Association? I'd like to say that the Kensington project, which got deferred by the Board of Supervisors last Tuesday, is too big for the site it is. And if it's built the way it is, it's going to mean the end of the convenience center. It's hard to say, and I don't really comment on it because there's really nothing else to say except that's too big and it belongs on the north side of Sunrise Valley, not the south side. If I could have a negative influence on my neighborhood, and that's why, and that's one of the reasons why I'm against it. It'd be nice if the RA board would, support it. It might be too late, but it'd be nice because really, it goes, and also I heard that convenience center, it's supposed to remain a convenience center, and if that's built, it will not remain a convenience center. And one last thing, I was Mike Sano I was on the board with him. I wish him a speedy recovery for his accident, so he can walk around without crutches.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Comments for
That's next to Cubby.
I didn't even notice that.
Mr. Abbott?
Yikes. Good thing it's just that.
Good evening.
Hello.
Yep, hi. My name's Ed Abbott. I live at 2218 Wake Robin Lane. I'm a member of the election committee. I'm representing myself and not the committee. I have reviewed the draft of the Code of Ethics. I met with Director Moody to discuss my comments on that document with him a couple days ago. His summary of my comments captures my concerns. The board has struggled with this for about 2 years. I believe the need for the code was driven by actions of members of the previous board. Those actions included a failure to follow rules and policies on conflict of interest, a board member's improper behavior during board meetings, and a lack of transparency on decisions about the purchase and modification of the lake house. I'm not a lawyer, but I believe the first two issues are covered by existing rules. The conflict of interest is spelled out in Virginia's Non-Stock Corporation Act, and member behavior is governed by Robert's rules. Both of these are part of the Reston's governing documents in some form, the deed, article of incorporation, the bylaws. I don't know if transparency is covered. I suggest before we continue with the effort to establish a code of ethics for the association, the board should decide what problem are we trying to solve and if there are provisions in the current rules that solve that problem. I'm not saying we don't need a code. I believe we do. As I told Director Mooney, the current draft is more than what I believe is needed. You don't ring a doorbell with a pile driver. Finally, I want to thank the board for your effort and Director Mooney for his time he took to meet with me. And in the interest of transparency, I should note he paid for lunch.
That's good.
Thanks, Ed.
McDonald's?
I didn't change his mind. I've also spoken with two other, Madam President, two other members of the Reston Association, Erwin Flashman and Steve Canner, who participated in all the ethics subcommittee meetings. And I've tried to make a consolidated report on their comments plus Ed's. And once all of them have reviewed and approved my summary, I will give it to you all.
Thank you.
Just a very brief follow-on. As most of you know, I'm going to be leaving the board shortly. And so a real gift would be the completion of that code of conduct. It's something that I've been advocating for from the time that I joined the board. I think it's important. Let's not have perfection be the enemy of good enough. We can revise it. But let's commit to try to do that. That would be a wonderful gift. Thank you.
Jim Surratt? Surratt?
Thank you.
Well, I'm back again about this recreation, not recreation, but kind of a therapy for a small group that was operating out of the
Name and address?
lake house.
Sir, I'm sorry to bother you. Could you give us your name and address? for
Oh,
the
I'm
record?
sorry, jumped ahead. My name's Jim Saraya. I live at 11487 Waterview Cluster.
Thank you, sir.
So what we need is a small space so that our 55 exercise group can continue our rehab exercise program, which helps us maintain needed mobility. This exercise program is unique for us in that the instructors give a lot of special attention to individual disability conditions. For myself, this program far exceeds benefit results I receive from other programs. A lot of the classes are like everybody does this and does this together. Whereas somebody has a particular, they can't do a particular thing, then the instructors direct that person to do something else that would be like that and help us much too. I participated in the Sterling Mind Body Fitness program for over a year. As a result, I enjoy better health and mobility. Other members in the group have expressed similar results to me. For our successful maintenance improvements to continue, we need our present space at the lake house or a similar possibility here in Reston Association. In fact, a year ago, about because the lake house had to have some other thing going on there, they needed the space. We came over here in this room, or maybe that room, but we did our exercise program. It worked very well. I mean, we're talking about 1 hour, 2 days a week, and that's all. So we appreciate your consideration in trying to help find us a place where we can continue our program. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, could I have a copy of your comments?
Okay, they were floating around.
You can have mine.
They might not have made it to you yet.
I'll give you this.
Sorry, I'm afraid so.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Okay, any more member comments? So look at us, 20 minutes ahead of schedule already. Okay.
Keep it up.
So I wanted to ask, is Larry here?
Oh, they're here.
Oh, they're here. We're good. Well, they might want to have a minute. It's okay. Nobody else wants to say anything? Erwin, you have nothing to say?
Write this, let me write this.
Are you well?
Let me write
Put that in the minutes. Erwin was offered a moment to speak and he had nothing to say.
Terry?
Patty?
Terry? He hasn't been here in a while.
I was going to say that too. Yeah, the Hook Road group met this past week, just a few days ago, right? Monday or Tuesday? Yeah. And I will pat us board members on the back that chose that group. It's a great group, very much diversity of opinion. I think all constituents are being represented. And they're getting ready to do what I call after-action report to report on the process itself, on how they felt it went, because this was kind of a pilot for RA. So excited to hear what you guys come up with for that. But the group is doing a good job. We have yet to see some dollars, which I keep asking for. Where's the dollars? Where's the dollars? And I keep being assured it's coming. So
We do need that.
we do need that.
We do need that quickly.
So
I think
Tammy, you have something to say. That is a shock.
Tammy Petrine, 2503 Foxcroft Way. I would just really briefly like to inform the board and the public that the county is engaging in a new zoning move. I went to a meeting last night at the Fairfax Center, and the county is taking 1,200 pages of antiquated legalese that is often contradictory, and they have hired a consulting firm to go over the whole thing and rewrite it. No legalese, easy to understand, lots of figurative charts and graphs and actual pictures to explain what they're trying to describe in text. So it's supposed to be extremely user-friendly. It will be IT-friendly When you pull it up, you will be able to find anything you want on your phone or tablet. So this process will go through multiple county hearings in different places, and it will indeed take a year and a half. When they are finished, the goal is to have something that's actually comprehensible. I asked, please, can you tell, I asked the consultant, from your future or previous work with different municipalities and counties, do you see an end to the continuous assault of citizens with one zoning change after another coming down the pike, where our group here and Reston Association are limp trying to keep up with what the effects are of zoning changes? And the consultant said, yes, indeed. It cuts way back on that, and he will recommend a 2-year cycle before new stuff comes. So I'm hoping that goes through, but at least we'll be able to, you and I will be able to understand what's going on, and the pages will be cited, so.
Thank Tammy. That's very
Thank you,
valuable
Madam
information.
President, a question. Tammy, does this project have a specific name?
Z-Mod.
ZMOD, okay.
And it's
ZMOD, okay.
zoning
Yep.
modernization is
Okay.
what it stands for, I think. They never
Yep.
specifically said that,
She
but.
just stole Larry's thunder.
Uh-oh.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Save more time.
That's okay.
Okay, I'll
The
sit-
agenda getting short.
So Larry, just hold tight a minute.
Thanks, Sam.
Board, can I get your permission to, if we move Larry to now on
Right
the
now.
Yep.
Toll House
Yep.
Brothers project while our other speaker's getting prepared?
Sure.
Larry, can you do that?
Can Kelsey
And
do
that
that?
ZMod thing. We've heard good things.
Yeah. Zima, Zuma.
Is it like
We've heard
ZPAC?
we've heard good
So
things.
Larry, not the
Good
whole
things about
updates,
Zuma.
but just the Toll Brothers part, the
Not
Toll
the South
Brothers
African president.
No,
Pulte
but the
project,
the satellite.
not the
Yes.
whole land use
Not the
part.
whole land use.
Yes.
Satellite.
Well,
Wouldn't know anything about it.
Fairly short.
maybe, yeah. Let's do the whole
Let's see
thing.
let's see how we roll. And then
Okay, all right.
Okay, what I want to talk about are 2 additions to property. These are 2 projects that we have been working in discussions with the 2 developers. You have a wealth of information in your packet. I just want to highlight real quickly, and we're going to talk also in executive session about this. Right here. I'll just give you the perspective. So the first one is Valiant Park by Toll Brothers. You may be familiar with this site. There was an angular building there on Sunrise Valley Drive, just east of Reston Heights, that was removed not too long ago. And what is proposed here is 54 townhouses. These townhouses will be similar to the ones Seekis is building across Roland Clark Place from there. So they're going to be adjacent, although it's separated by Roland Clark Place. That's sort of the generalized layout of the property. We have been working with them, and they have committed to a capital contribution. We'll discuss that in more detail in executive session tonight. There is no property being conveyed to Reston Association on this project, unlike Seekis, where we got the tot lot, the play area, and pathways and so forth. They are required to put in the sidewalk and cycle track, which the county is requiring, along the frontage of Sunrise Valley Drive. They will have a public art component in the center, up kind of on the north end of that, in this what they call the Central Muse. And so we are working with them, and what we're asking for is that this be brought forth to public hearing at the February meeting, which is a requirement in our documents to bring in additions to property. So again, no on-site maintenance. They'll have a cluster association to come in as full Reston Association members. The second of those is the lofts at Reston Station. This is a project by Pulte. This is actually under construction right now. They're doing utility work. The old one-story building has been removed. And if you go over there, this is off Michael Faraday Drive. It's an area that's surrounded by what is going to be redevelopment. The midline project to the west, JBG, EYA, a couple Rooney projects to the south and to the east. This is 44 units in 2/2s and a small condominium building. Again, no on-site maintenance being provided by Reston Association on this site. And they will have a a cluster condo association for the management of, what they have there. And we are in discussions with them with respect to the capital contribution and their interest to bring those 44 units as full Reston Association members as well. So what we'd like to do is have you authorize these for public hearing at the February meeting and to consider it. And we'll be further along in our negotiations at that point as well. We'll talk about later.
David, you want to make a motion?
So moved.
I'd like to make a motion, move to authorize a public hearing for the addition to property requests for Valley and Park and Lofts at Reston Station at the regular Board of Directors meeting on February the 22nd, 2018.
Second?
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any
Good work.
opposed?
Yep.
Thanks, David.
You want us to continue?
Yeah.
Moving right along. So, quick land use update we want to provide for you. I'm going to share the duties with television and with
You can talk about
Kelsey.
Z-Mod?
Sorry. Talk about that. Yes. So what I want to do is, these are things we're going to cover briefly. First and foremost, we're doing a lot more coordination now to try to get the word out. We have had a couple of meetings with our new planning commissioner, John Carter, who I think most of you have met or experienced. Meetings with him. I think we're making some positive inroads with him in terms of what some of the concerns are with the community. He has attended the last two planning and zoning committee meetings, which is I think a refreshing change, and he's been speaking up, which I think has surprised some of the development community. So we're also doing additional coordination with the Planning and Zoning Committee, and we're trying to get more in sync the timing of the Planning and Zoning Committee review of projects, as well as our own committees, and for those that are under the Reston Association covenants, the DRB reviews. And we're trying to make sure that those happen in a coordinated manner. It's not always easy because of the applications in with the county. They constantly change. There may be 2, 3, or 4 revisions based on county comments, and each of those has to then come back to the Planning and Zoning Committee. So we're trying to work through that procedural aspect as well. And we're also working on an application checklist that Planning and Zoning Committee is working on. We're working on a draft internally, and we want to share those so that the same information is being asked of the applicants in the public forums. So that is it consistent with the comp plan? Is it, how does it address the zoning ordinance? What waivers and modifications are being requested? How are the county trails plan or the bike master plan, how are those being addressed? So all these types of things, we want to make sure that those things are brought out in those public meetings for everybody's information. And then we're also setting up a meeting with the Reston core team. That is the group of county reviewers, which urban forestry, transportation, of course the planning staff, VDOT. And we want to have, John McBride and I had met with them about 1.5 years ago to kind of talk about the Reston processes. We want to do that again. We want to work with John Carter on that as well, because obviously he's new in his role and he needs to learn that process. And we're also going to set up a meeting specifically with the Regional Park Authority and the Fairfax County Park Authority to talk about the plan for the recreation facilities in Reston. And where's that going? The dollars are starting to come in. And so what is the plan for implementation on those things? And with respect to that, I want to reference something from this past Monday's Planning and Zoning Committee meeting. Reston Crescent, which is the 36-acre parcel directly across Sunrise Valley Drive from here, was up, I think it was the second time that they've been in front of P&Z. And I'm not sure who it was. It might have been Tammy who asked the question. Somebody asked the question about ball field. You've heard me talk about that project before, that it warrants on-site a ball field. So the applicant's representative attorney said, well, the applicant Brookfield is looking at and is in negotiations with a property owner to purchase property, I'll use quotes, in the corridor where there will be full-service ball fields built. And they're doing that in consultation and in conjunction with the Park Authority. We don't know the location of that. We don't know the size of it, but it sort of baited our ears, and so we're going to try to find out more information about that as soon as possible.
Great.
And to see just where those fields are and how many fields it is, what kind of fields, and those kinds of things. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. Then real quickly, the Lake Ann Fellowship House redevelopment. This came before Planning and Zoning Committee 2 meetings ago, and this is a project that had come about 3 or 4 years ago, and that particular development project fell through for a couple of reasons. Key to this one is, and unlike the prior iteration, the development, it's a nonprofit development corporation, they have gotten HUD funding to secure additional funding so that they can replace all 240 units. You may recall that the prior application that was trying to make it through only replaced about 140. So there were about 100 units worth of people that were going to be displaced. So they have secured HUD funding, and their plan is to build the new building, move all 240 units worth of residents over to the new building, and then on where the existing building is, raise that, and then construct market rate units. Right now, it's townhouses that are being considered. They are getting their first round of comments from the county, I think on Monday. We have a meeting set up with them in a couple weeks just to kind of talk through the design review board process and what some of those expectations are. And so there'll be a lot more coming about this project, but this one, which is obviously under the Reston Association covenants, has a high degree of interest amongst lots of people in the community. So we'll be following that very closely.
Yep, you want to see that.
And I'm going to turn it over to Kelsey. See, Tanya, see the slide? It's okay.
Good evening. Yeah, so
Kelsey.
Tammy. Oh, good evening. So Tammy already did an excellent job covering ZMOD. So what I'm going to highlight is the community input aspect. The county really was highlighting the importance of community involvement. So currently they have an online survey available. We've pushed it out in RA News. There's also a link up here on this presentation. It's open till the end of this month, so we encourage members and all of the Reston community to make sure you take that survey. And it's basically about the legibility of the ordinance, so getting your feedback on how you feel about the way it's currently structured. They also have a website, which is at the bottom of this slide, where you can enroll in a notification email list. So that way, over the next year and a half, you'll know anytime there's the opportunity to provide input. There's also a place to provide comments at any time throughout the process. So I'll just leave it there. The second current initiative that's going on at the county is a zoning ordinance amendment to address short-term rentals, which we've discussed with the board previously. The county is nearing completion of the development of their ordinance. So that was provided, the latest draft was provided in your board packet this evening. And according to county staff, that language is going to be generally what is presented to the Board of Supervisors for authorization. And that's anticipated to happen in late March. So essentially what's going to happen is the ordinance will need to work in tandem with the RA covenants that will allow us, the association, the ability to enforce the proposed regulations. So as directed by this board back in November, we are going to continue to work with the county and monitor the finalization of this. And once the final text is available, we'll be bringing this back to you for your adoption. And the last initiative I'm going to touch on is the comprehensive plan amendment for building repurposing. I'm sure most of you recall this. Phase 2 has just been initiated by the county. They have their first community meeting this Monday, the 29th. The scope of this phase is essentially the same as Phase 1, other than the geography has been expanded from just the TSAs to include the entire county. So that means all of Reston. The general concern, I would say, is similar to Phase 1, which is the potential for unplanned residential units beyond what was contemplated in the Reston Master Plan. So as our next steps, we wanted to let you know that we will be attending this meeting. We've already been in contact with county staff about this, so we can start to determine what the implications of this could be on Reston, and we'll be coming back to the board next month on an update, with an update, excuse me. Yeah.
John?
Madam President, could you remind the board the outcome of our position with the Board of Supervisors on Phase 1?
Phase 1? Yeah, so the outcome essentially was that the Board of Supervisor Hudgens confirmed that that this amendment, as it applied to the TSAs, would not allow for any additional residential units beyond the designated planned. There was a total number of units that was planned and written in the comp plan, and I don't recall the exact reference. I'll have it here if you would like it. Would you like the exact reference? Or? Okay. But essentially, they confirmed that it would not add any additional units beyond what was already identified in the comprehensive plan. And the challenge would be here is that for all of Reston, we don't necessarily have that exact number identified in writing. So that's what we're going to have to address.
So was that the supervisor's position or staff's position?
Staff's position was to make sure that there were no additional units, and the supervisor confirmed that, I believe, was our agreement.
Thank you.
Yes. Anything else?
Thanks, Kelsey.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Is that it, Larry? That's it? Really? Yes. All right, thank you, guys. I know you have to stick around. Sorry about that. Okay, Moira and Jill, you guys all set? Oh, okay, like just a few minutes? Yeah. Brief pause while we set up.
Hi, what's that?
Yeah, good.
Wow.
Go higher.
Did I get one?
What costume?
I get it from your glasses.
If you like.
You take from wherever you would like.
Can't really. We need you by a mic, though.
So they can hear it
But
all.
you can take the mic, I think.
You
from
can
the-
take it and walk around with it. Fill out on your side.
I just need to sync
Dating
with.
myself.
Where's the microphone?
Right there. Just grab that little green droid. Yeah.
Should we put it up here? I'm gonna.
Just the last line.
Well, while she gets set up, we can tell you who we are and what we're doing. I'm Jill Gallagher, and this is Moira Callahan, and we were part of the earlier Media World team that was selected to look at the purchase of the Lake House property. And our negotiations with RA over our contract fell through, and our team semi-dissolved. But two of us really felt vested in this project, and we had put in a lot of time and effort to look at all the documents that were touching this project. And we actually shared our documents with Stone Turn, and we shared our timeline. And what our approach was to take all the documents and put them in order. And we wanted to see what kind of decisions were made when and by who, because how can you tell if processes are followed if you don't know when decisions are made? So that was our approach, and as we started to collect the information, we had gaps in our information. We went back to RA, and RA was very helpful, give us some more information. So we took what was public information, asked for additional information, and we charted it on a chart, basically. And this is it's an Excel spreadsheet. And on the top are dates and major events in red. And on the side are people that were involved. So every line represents a person who is involved in the decision around the project. And you'll see what's the saddest thing about this is that the lower levels are members. And members were not so involved. And as members, that's what concerned us the most. And we didn't make this huge so that we called out people specifically. We could have. That wasn't our intent. Our intent is to show you patterns of behavior that aren't favorable to members. And we're telling you this as a board, and we're telling you this as staff, so that when you go to make decisions in the future, that you would consider members more. Our goal is not to point fingers or to place blame. Our goal is to share with you the lessons that we learned out of the lake house property so that you guys can incorporate them into your processes. And I now sit on the fiscal committee, and one of the goals of the fiscal committee is to look at all the policies to make sure we're spending our money right. And the fiscal committee, I think, could use some of these lessons learned to incorporate them into our policy. And while Stone Turn's report was very, very good, it was very high level. So when they say your processes are insufficient, what does that mean? I have no idea. But if you tell me that somebody is charging things on their credit card more than they should, then I know what to fix. So I really wanted to look at the specifics of the decisions and to go back and to give you guys recommendations as to how you can specifically improve your processes. Not to point fingers, not to place blame, because everyone in this room was part of the decision. There was a referendum, there was a board vote, there was executive sessions, there was committee involvement, not as much as we would have liked, but there was committee involvement, and everyone who is here that is concerned about the project had a part or could have had a part in the decision. So our goal is not to place blame. Our goal is to look at this as a lessons learned case study so that you guys can understand how we can manage our money better as a team. So this is what our presentation is about, and if you have any questions, please jot them down and ask us at the end, because the material is very dense, and we want you all to listen and understand the sequence of events, and then you can ask questions. Okay? Yep.
So I gave you the background. Data collection. We spent a lot of time collecting information. It may not have been as much time as you had wanted us to spend, but we spent a lot of our own free time doing this, and it was a lot of work. We spent time talking to staff, former board members, RA members. We spent time in county offices. We reviewed documents. We spoke with county staff, with the Appraisal Institute, with the title company. We developed a timeline that is likely the most comprehensive account of the purchase and renovation that exists. And we reviewed documents that were provided by Stone Turn and RA.
Perfect,
thanks.
Sorry. And one of the things that we wanted to do is point you out what we really didn't like about Stone Turn's observations. We thought they did a great job in the time given, and we used some of their documents that we didn't have, and they used a lot of documents in our timeline that we had. So, but the first observation that they had is that this was an unusual transaction. The transaction was unusual. You know, we hadn't bought a property like that before, but RA is a multi-million-dollar organization. We own a lot of assets. You know, we have people on our board and on our staff that manage assets. So it's not that we don't have the capability. You know, so that one, I was a little bit like, okay, that's an observation. We agree with observation 3 that the estimation process for the internal renovations was not performed well. This is definitely a lesson learned from the lake house that we can take forward to other projects. The second and the fourth and the fifth observations are all focused on those internal control processes. Stone Turn was looking to see basically if people followed the processes that were in place, and they found that there were either no written policies or the written policies in place were insufficient. But we saw that there were instances where you did have policies. There's legal invoices that are super detailed, paid on time, and delivered monthly. And we had renovation invoices that had a single line for a huge budget item that wasn't even itemized. So, there's obviously some processes in place because some people are following them and other people aren't. So it might be a matter of enforcement. We don't know. But those observations on insufficient policies for us weren't good enough. And we really wanted to dive into those more. Yeah. Okay, so we already talked to you a little bit about our timeline and the documents that we received. Each of the places where there are black lines, this starts back, this is the purchase of the property in 1973. 81, whatever. Each of these represents a different area, and you can see the involvement of different people. And for us, the trends were that not all the people were involved. So for us, a big standout was our CFO was not involved. Was not involved in major decisions of the purchase. And we have to caveat that a little because we lost a CFO in the middle. But as a new CFO is ramped up, we have lines where the CFO is missing from decision after decision after decision, and it's just probably getting you ramped up and probably getting people set. But after a certain while, you should have been ramped up. You should have been on there. So we really feel like the CFO should be part of every major decision that touches money in the organization. And the CEO was involved in a lot, in very big decisions. Knew about them, touched base with people. Was very involved. In the early phases when the project was getting started, we had our contract attorneys both involved with the transaction, which makes sense because they're doing contracts and they're doing legal work. Our fault is not that they were involved, our fault that our CFO wasn't. Our fault is that some of our staff that would normally manage capital projects weren't. So we had people outside of our organization that aren't employees knowing more than our employees in our organization. So that to us was a big standout. And as you go along, the same kind of thing happens with our contractors for renovations. They knew a lot about what was going on, and our internal staff in here did not. So it's making sure that our staff and our members and our us are driving the decisions and not contracted staff. We saw that in renovations, we saw that in legal, we saw that they're more involved than our staff were. If we blow this up, you would see, some of our staffing, some of our staffing people. To Kate's, you didn't have a capital projects person, so that was an issue. So whenever there was a void in our staffing, our contract staff filled in. So keep that in mind when you're talking about hiring people, because we had decisions that were made by our contract staff, and so that was an issue for us. Yeah.
Okay.
Tammy had the handout. We gave you important dates on there that.
Did Tammy get passed out?
Yeah, Tammy passed it out. We
Thanks,
gave you
Tammy.
important dates. These are high-level dates of things that happened, just because even in our own minds, we know this really well, but we lost track. So we put it in front of you so you can keep track. Is that you?
No, it's still you.
Okay. Okay. So these were our main observations from our timeline, that our external players and our contracted staff seem to be leading a lot of the activities, and they seem to be making a lot of the decisions, such as setting the purchase price. They were very involved with that. Developing the timeline for purchase. They were very involved in that. Setting the terms of the contract. Sometimes we weren't even involved in that. We had legal staff that were, some of our people, we had no evidence of emails or letters that we were even involved in some of the contracts, not even a review of some of the contracts. Defining statement of work, our renovation staff clearly defined their work. Developing their budgets, they would put a budget forward, and our contracted staff were driving a lot of the documents and decisions that we saw. I have to caveat that and say we may not have seen everything. And there's definitely probably telephone conversations, text messages that we didn't see. We only what was on paper we saw. So, and they were involved in decision making more than our own staff, more than our committees, more than our board. So that was an issue. The CFO, we told you, we kind of kept at arm's length. The committees and the board and the members were not fully informed, or they were not informed in a timely way on major decisions of that project. You were informed a lot of times after the fact, which was when we panned it out, we're like, wait, they didn't even know. So some of the board decisions were like that, and definitely agree with Stone Turn the internal documentations on decisions. There were some major decisions that were made from moving from purchasing just a slice of the land to purchasing the entire property that we didn't see go before the board at all. It may have gone in committee, it may have gone, but your notes are not, they're terrible. We don't see committee notes, we don't see executive session notes. We see no documentation of some major decisions. And the critical decisions seem to have occurred before or without any board input or knowledge. Some major decisions about pricing and contracts and terms of contracts that were negotiated before the board saw them.
Want to do that one?
You can do it.
All right. So we wanted to point out that the transaction that occurred, actually, the purchase of this property actually occurred when Kate was just coming into becoming a CEO. And so you have to keep in mind that this occurred during her first couple years in that position. And I'm not sure that people appreciate that, and I think it's important to point out. There were times when she had no CFO. If I remember correctly from the timeline, when she came on, I think the CFO resigned. Then she was without a CFO, and then she got a new CFO. And when you have new staff, you have to retrain or train them, and so that takes time. And then that CFO resigned, and then you had another CFO. So I think those things are worth pointing out as we consider the scope of this project. In addition to that, we had a lot of pressure from the community. Some didn't want the property developed, and some did, and green space advocates. The owner had a leave it or take it or leave it approach. So you have to keep those things in mind too as we consider this purchase of this property. Anything out there? We're going to talk a little bit about the zoning history, which we feel was not clearly explained. We feel, as I said, the information was not shared that could have affected the referendum vote. This is what was included in the fact sheet, that it was the property was zoned to allow office space with the option to expand that space with an adjoining two-story building and a footprint that extends 50 feet into Lake Newport, and the allowable uses are office and restaurant. Many members thought that the property would be developed into a restaurant, and that was an imminent thing, that it was going to happen immediately. Many people that we spoke with said that. Some board members and members of the community emphasized the grand scale and seemed to create a fear factor. In 2015, the appraiser wrote that the seller was approached by 2 restaurants, but we could not find any evidence to verify this fact or to verify that information. The sketch was found on RA's website. The fact sheet did not say that the restaurant was removed from the 1981 site plan in 1982, and that it was either denied or withdrawn. The county has no record of any PRC or site plan filed since 1981, and I have to tell you, I went combing through county offices, and I was really surprised by that fact, and I don't know that anyone understood that, but I didn't, because I saw these drawings and just assumed that that was an approved plan. They don't have anything on county file with that photo or anything about that plan. It does not make any sense to me why you would show a plan that was denied or withdrawn in 2003.
And as we talked to our neighbors, and I mean, they felt the same way. That's why we're telling you, because they felt the same. They said, well, they're going to bring in a big restaurant. Everybody felt the same way. You know, the message that came across was that it was imminent.
What the fact sheet also did not say is that adding an eating establishment to the site that is unrelated to the existing sales center would require a PRC plan and a site plan, among other provisions. You would have to go through these steps. You'd have to go through compliance, so PRC plan and site plan, you'd have to have some sort of review to make sure it was a construction in a site plane, or floodplain. You'd have to make sure that it complied with the Chesapeake Bay ordinance. You'd have to get BOC or BOS approval for a special exception. It'd have to go through Reston Planning and Zoning. It'd have to go by the DRB. And that's a very lengthy process that would take it would take months, if not maybe, up to a year.
So we were wondering why the rush? For us, it was like, okay, even if someone came in and expressed interest, you still had to go through all those approval processes, and the community would still have to see it. So even if someone proposed it, we would have to still have time.
All right. Yeah, you'd have to have notification to the neighbors. We believe that this lack of information could have affected, again, the vote. Members were told that that the property purchase would increase green space, and many members voted for this project for that reason, and they now feel misled because the green build-out didn't occur.
And that was in the
the handout called Board Urges a Yes Vote. Some board members felt it was up to the members to decide. Some board members felt that the information distributed did not provide enough information. But I have to tell you, as board members, we do look to you because you sit here and we don't. And so we kind of rely on you to maybe be, some eyes and ears for us. According to the Reston deed, if 3 or more directors dissent from the board of directors' recommendation, the board shall make a good faith effort to present a minority view and materials accompanying the referendum ballot. So that's in the deed. And I wasn't sure if any board member was aware that that was in the deed. In speaking with some board members, it seems they felt pressure not to speak unfavorably about the purchase, and perhaps it's because of this clause. I don't know.
So our next area that we looked at was the early negotiations, and you can click the next one. We were surprised. We had done a lot of research, and we handed over most of our stuff to Stone Turn, and Stone Turn pulled a few more things out, and we didn't know some of the things even after all of our research. But publicly, it wasn't known that really negotiations started back in June 2014. And there was some negotiations for the property then, and what it told me at that point is that there was really an agreement on price. There's some, but it didn't change at all. I mean, you're talking 2014, and there hadn't been an appraisal, there hadn't been nothing was. No one even looked at the property, and the price is there. So you had an outside developer, Beach, come in and say, can we get together a joint deal, basically? And this is from some of Stone Turn's documents, where the developer would pay 2.28 in closing costs, and RA would purchase the land, right, at 420. And then it changed a little bit, and the developer paid a little less. But if you notice what the developer is paying, it's 1.6 now for the property. And Reston's paying $460 for the land. But in this case, RA was just concerned about talking about the land, and the cost was falling just below the referendum threshold. So for us, it wouldn't have gone to us. We wouldn't have seen it. And we didn't see. I got to be frank with you. Your notes on committees are terrible. I can't find them. I don't see them. They're not posted anywhere, so it could have been through your fiscal committee or your board or executive session. I don't know, but we had no evidence that deal was discussed at a committee level. And we would have liked to have it gone to fiscal. Have fiscal look at it. Let them see it. Next one. So Sharon provided a land deal email And the email was really coming from RA's land use attorney to RA's CEO and the senior director of land use planning. And this document for me and for both of us actually is a key document, and it's problematic because, you know, it really shows that the first deal was really, you know, really carved out in 2014 and didn't, you know, the price didn't really vary much after that point. And the deal is being communicated to RA staff via email. So the attorney was clearly part of the negotiations. It's not clear if the RA board was part of the negotiations. As a member, I would like to know who was there. I would like to know who was part of those negotiations, who was driving that deal. The document says in it, the email says in it, that the sales price 2.7 is from a valuation perspective identical to the appraised value in 2010 for the entire property. But in a review of the 2010 appraisal, this is only identical to the restaurant appraisal. This ignores the office appraisal altogether. So RA is not told that there's a second lower appraisal in there, and I don't know why. And the letter also says that if the sale, I just don't know. I'm not saying it's bad. It's not my business. I don't know. But as a member, it didn't make sense to me. And then the document said, if this sale is consummated, the efforts of Save Lake Newport Group and RA have been successful. And as a member, I was like, wait, stop. Is the land use attorney representing us, or is the land use attorney representing the Save Lake Newport Group? And if we're paying him, you know, I just want to know, are we the ones being represented? And on the land use attorney states that he can explain why the price of the land is fair and commercially reasonable, and it puts the value of the land at $420,000 for approximately 1.6 acres, which puts it at about $250 an acre, whereas the price in the 2010 appraisal is $23,000 an acre. So I don't know how that's a fair deal for RA at all. And I was like, am I doing the math wrong? I couldn't figure it out. But anything, you know, in excess of that amount requires referendum, and this land stuff was coming in right underneath it. So I would have liked to have voted on that, and I would have liked to have known more facts about that land, the land deal. And we don't know, we don't see record of it, but it doesn't look like the board was aware of any negotiations to purchase the land in 2014. It could be, you could have it. It could be an executive session, but there's no notes.
All right, so documents show that around 2014, the developer pulled out of the land deal, and the discussion evolved into purchasing the full property between RA and the developer, or the seller. In August 2014, the property seller requests to meet with RA, yeah, here we are.
Yep. Oh, is that me?
Yep, that's you.
At some point, this land deal kind of falls through. We don't know, there's not documentation, but sometimes around June 14, the developer, Beach, pulls out of the land deal, and then the Tetra property seller requests a meeting with RA starting in August 2014. And at some point between September and December, there seems to be an agreement in principle with the staff whereby RA would pursue to purchase the entire property. And that the land use attorney, the general counsel, the staff, they'll all begin working on this deal. There's emails exchanged that from the Stone Turn report and from a couple of gaps that we saw, and from invoicing of legal fees, that our legal staff are working on the purchase. And there appears to be great urgency to purchase, of course, on behalf of the owner, because he wants to sell it. There's a real big push from the property seller, and lots of quick actions from our staff on this, and a whole big discussion in the timeline to purchase. It's all evidenced in emails. And again, the board didn't seem to be looped into this until January 2015, when you guys had your first meeting on it. And the price at that point in November, December is assumed to be 2.65 to 2.7. And reminder, we didn't have an what's it called, engineering report, anything on it. But there's a starting point on the price again. And in December 2014, RA commissions an appraisal, and at the end of 2014.
Right. In reviewing the records, it does not appear that RA fact-checked or pulled in the fiscal committee to analyze that, or consulted the board for its advice. So this is another area where RA's processes could be improved by consulting with others, you know, and analyzing some numbers. Yep.
And again, we is a push for the fiscal committee, get them involved. And the area for us that we started on, basically, when we were part of the Media World group, was the appraisal, and that's what grabbed our attention the most, and actually grabbed Stone Turn's attention also. They said the appraisal of the Tetra property was a key document in the process. So it wasn't just us. But basically, this is what you had. You had a 2010 appraisal that gives you a value for the land, excess land 59,000. Gives you a value for continued office use at 1.17, and it gives you the value as that big restaurant pad site, assuming potential to expand at 2.76. Okay. Now the next one is our 2015, and basically we've removed the top two instructions, and our bottom instructions become the only instructions given to the appraiser. So you're assuming restaurant use. Now you know what you know about zoning, because we just went over that, and now we have an instruction about the restaurant use, so we can't figure out, we had to go back to our date, and we looked on our timeline, so when did we know about the appraisal, when did we know about the value of the land, and when did we know about the zoning? And we put them in order here.
Which instruction was that?
It was, according to what we've learned, it was the land use attorney's instruction.
To the appraiser.
To the appraiser.
It started as a one-line instruction from the CEO in a official engagement letter to the appraiser that just said restaurant use. But as the appraisal was conducted, it turned into, this is per Stone Turn. We didn't interview people. They said that it turned into the restaurant use with deferred maintenance included. So we're assuming the cost of deferred maintenance in the price of the building. So we would be paying
that. These are facts that we felt that the members may not know. There are 7 facts that we came across, and we didn't think you knew, or we didn't know, that we wanted to share with you. Number 1 is that the property seller expressed concern that the appraisal would not meet his asking price. These 2 statements were made around the time that RA engaged with the appraiser.
He basically said that, you know, most likely the appraisal is not going to get the price that I want. And,
right.
And he acknowledged that in email twice.
Right. And if it doesn't come to my price, what does that mean? And we all know that, or we were told that it was a take it or leave it. But nonetheless, he seemed a little bit nervous about it.
Yeah, is that you?
That's you.
Okay. And in these, some of the documents that Stone Turn found also pointed out other people had concerns with price. So your CFO at the time, Harris, said that, you know, he'd be hard pressed to find a buyer willing to lock into that 2.7, and we need to decide how much of a premium are we willing to pay. And our general counsel said we shouldn't rush into this, that it's overpriced. And those were all in December of 2014 before it went to the board.
Right. People felt because the land use attorney stated that the asking price aligned with the appraisal, that they just assumed that that was what it was, and they didn't ask any questions. And as members, we feel it would have helped if someone on staff had read the 2010 appraisal. We didn't have any indication that they had.
Yep.
We learned that the appraisal instructions were changed after the CEO had signed the appraisal engagement letter. So she signed the letter in 12/12 of 15. And the appraisal was conducted on January 23, 2015.
And the appraiser notes the client instruction, you know, the client instruction.
2014?
2014.
Oh, sorry, 2014,
yes,
I apologize.
Yeah, the
You're
engagement
right.
letter is 2014, and the appraisal is 2015.
So on the left is the actual engagement letter. This is just a snap or a screenshot, and on the right are screenshots from the appraisal where you see by client instruction we've been informed to assume that any and all deferred maintenance currently existing as of the date of appraisal has been corrected. We've been asked to assume that according to our client's instruction, a restaurant would have potential for extending out into the lake with 6,930 feet. Both of the assumptions would significantly drive up the price of the property. It's not clear when the board became aware of the fact that the property was appraised for a restaurant use with deferred maintenance included, and if they ever knew that the instructions were changed.
So basically, we tagged on a couple special conditions to our instruction. The first condition was that it get appraised as a restaurant only. And the second special condition was that we assume all deferred maintenance is included. So both of those conditions would have driven up the price.
Right.
And I don't know why we'd want to ever assume as the buyer why deferred maintenance would be included. I don't understand that at all. I'm a homeowner. I don't own like big property, but I wouldn't want to assume someone else's deferred maintenance.
Next. Yeah. That's you again.
Okay. And Stone Turn reported that no member of the association, staff, or board had any direct communication with the appraiser. We don't know that. There's no transactions, no emails or anything, but the selection of the appraiser was made by the Land Use Council. This is all per Stone Turn. This is not our documents. The client instruction to the appraiser was provided by the Land Use Council.
The CFO and board appear not to have been provided with, we feel, with ample opportunity to review the appraisal before the purchase price was presented to the seller. And I say this, and Jill and I both do, because we read that appraisal over and over and over again. It's a 123 or 25 page document. It's not a small thing, it's very dense. The letter of intent was prepared, well, let me go back. The CFO and board appear not to have been provided with ample opportunity to review the appraisal before the purchase was presented to the seller. If I said it once before, I'm going to say it again because that's really important. The letter of intent was prepared the same day that the appraisal was received on February 4th, 2015. And on the morning of the following day, so you imagine it was received, I think it was in the evening, the land use attorney prompted the CEO to send the seller the letter of intent with the purchase price included. So this occurs less than 36 hours after the 125-page appraisal was received. Just wrap your head around that. Okay, then the CEO did not send the CFO the full appraisal until after the letter of intent with the purchase price was included. It was shared with others, but it was not shared or emailed to him. And we found emails saying, you know, I see all this paperwork, but I don't have this appraisal, so can you please share it with me? So we saw that he was not involved or sent that until after the letter of intent was already sent with the purchase price. We noted that he tendered his resignation 11 days later. We feel the CFO is critical in this process and should have been included on these and other emails and matters critical to the property purchase and construction, including the LOI that listed the price. Next, the board. Stone Turn reported that the board was provided the opportunity to review the appraisal during the executive session on February 9th. However, during that meeting, thank you, a board member stated in the later half of the meeting, after executive session was long over, that she wasn't even sure what the price was because she'd not seen the appraisal. The board apparently was shown an appraisal summary, and the appraisal summary did not include highest and best use, that the property was asked to be appraised as a restaurant, and deferred maintenance was included. We found no evidence that the full appraisal was sent to the board members by email or was made available for review at the association's offices. However, we understand the board members could have requested to review it at any time. We feel the board could have been given the full appraisal electronically, as staff had already been given that. An appraisal is a very complex document. As we said, it requires a significant amount of time. An entire board meeting could have been devoted just to the appraisal and the bank loan alone. Lastly, it should be noted that the executive session was held not to reveal the seller's hand. However, the seller had already been shown or given the price, and so that was very confusing to us.
One of the reasons why they were saying if people need to go in executive session is because you didn't want to reveal your hand to the owner. And when we went back and looked again at our timeline and the plotting of events, we said, wait, they already had the price because they got the letter of intent the day before. So going into executive session for me as a member, I was like, wait, I don't understand this because now I don't see anything that's going on, and it's very hard as members when you do this, and it's very hard if you come out and give only a piece of what you talked about because we can't track. As members, we can't track, and it's important for us to know. We pay the money.
appraisal fact 6, the information provided to the board appears to be inaccurate. So the first point was that the land use attorney told the board of directors during a February 26th board meeting that the rest of the site has the ability under its zoning to be a restaurant use at 6,930 square feet or additional office use at the same square footage. But in the appraisal itself, it says the property seller is quoted as reporting to the appraiser that the office bar cannot be expanded, and county correspondence seems to correspond with that and confirm that statement. The land use attorney told the board of directors on February 26th that the property is not currently used to its highest and best use. However, the appraisal stated the highest and best use was to remain as an office and held. And it said that in 2010, and it said that in 2015. Appraisal fact number 7. You want to do that one? That's
Yeah, one of the things when we were looking at the appraisal, it's one of the big projects that we tackled early on when we were still under the auspices of Media World, and one of the things that I wanted to do was go back and see if we got a loan from a bank, then maybe there's an appraisal from the bank, and maybe we can go and look and see what the bank said it was worth. But the bank didn't obtain the appraisal, and I cannot understand why a bank wouldn't obtain an appraisal until we talked to some bankers, basically, and they figured that because it's backed by assessments, our loan was backed by our assessments, and not secured by the property itself, that there wasn't a need for an appraisal. So I had no check and balance on what our appraisal said because I had nobody of a third-party honest broker, who had some skin in the game, valuing the property. And because the loan was, being paid for by our assessments, so our loan's guaranteed by our assessments, not by the property. That it didn't require the appraisal. And as a future lesson learned, I would urge you to get 2 appraisals. I would urge you to seek out another opinion on the value of a property that size. I would caution you against committing all of our assessments to loans because you just don't know what will happen. And I thought we lost the check and balance in that opportunity. Again?
This is about the fact sheet. The fact sheet.
Yeah.
The fact sheet sent to members did not clarify that bank loan would be backed by assessments and not secured by the property itself. And that's what in the bottom section is what the fact sheet said.
Well, people thought in the fact sheet, because you were giving program revenue, they thought that the loan was going to be paid out of program revenue. When you talk to people on the street, they say, how are we paying the loan for the lake house? They're like, oh, they're going to have all these programs. They're going to run camps. That's not going to pay the loan on the lake house. And that was not clear in the fact sheet. And so that was a definite problem. And the other thing on there is that the use of the Comstock proffers were specifically tied to the property, whereas before, when they first started out, years and years and years ago, they weren't attached to this property. So those funds were unrestricted. I'm a budget person. Having unrestricted funds is good. You can put them where you want. You can move them around. You can do whatever you want. All of a sudden, we tied them down and we put them to this project only. So they can only be used for this project. And that wasn't really conveyed. It was only through digging that we understood, like, oh, that's what happened.
Leaseback is important.
Yeah, the leaseback for me is kind of a tricky subject. So we saw in the fact sheet, I saw it as a positive in the fact sheet that we were leasing the property back to the owner because I'm like, okay, we're guaranteed revenue for a few months while we figure things out and set up programs and maybe pull in renovations. But the rate that was negotiated with the property seller was $8,000 a month. And if the demand for the property was $8,000 a month, then why are we taking a loan that puts us at $15,000 a month? It's not even going to cover it. So I was I'm like, the market value. You're charging him the market value of the property. And this was all known before the purchase was complete. And the leaseback was sold to us as members as a positive aspect of the project. And I, even as a finance budget person, took it as a positive aspect of the project. But what we didn't know is that you're charging them $8,000 when we're assuming a loan for $15,000 a month. So, and further, on the leaseback, the members were told in May in the fact sheet that the owner would be leasing until December 2016, and then shortly after that, there was some contract negotiations. There were talks. It was formalized. It was written down that they were going to have one 6-month term and 2 6-month renewals. So he could get out in 2015. That contradicts the fact sheet, and we were never told that. So there's no evidence either that members of the board were told that. This was all part of some contract negotiations in between the fact sheet and the closing. And the board was not told that term of that leaseback changed. The first sign that we saw it could have happened beforehand, we don't know. But the first sign that we saw it on paper was 1 week after the closing. And on that change alone, we lost nearly $100,000.
RA staff committed Comstock proffers to the project in 2015. So the Comstock proffers actually date back to 2010 when Milton Matthews was the CEO, and they were for a sum of $300,000 and then another sum that was to be determined. And it wasn't until the negotiations started to occur that RA started negotiating with Comstock about using these proffers for this specific project. So up until that time, they did not seem to be tied to that project as far as we could tell. It has been pointed out to us that it's highly coincidental that the first loan amount mentioned was for $2 million, and the Comstock proffers, which were $300,000, $350,000 together, added all total to be $2.65 million, which was conveniently matching the appraisal price.
So there was an original loan amount that they were seeking of $2 million that was mentioned in public meetings, and that's what we couldn't figure out. How did it go from $2 million to $2.65? And after we looked at it, we said, wait, how does it go from a $2 million loan to a $2.65 million loan? And then we were like, wait a minute, the proffers are $6.5, right? $650,000. So we were like, maybe they're going to take out a $2 million loan and put $650 of the proffers against that, and then we wouldn't have to take so much of a loan. But we ended up taking $2.65 loan. So I'm like, at the end of the day, we took the loan. But that amount to us kind of stuck out because it was the $650,000. On this, the uses for us were not very well estimated. They're speculative. They weren't discussed at length. The CFO showed some program revenues. He showed operating costs. He showed monthly operating costs, but he also showed a deficit. He showed that it wasn't going to cover the costs. And members raised issues about the shortfall. And they said, we can't afford it. It's not going to pay. And in my mind, that's what made me think the members think we're going to cover the loan with program costs. And that was not specifically conveyed.
The initial assessments of renovation costs were cursory. This is about the engineer report. So the engineer was brought in to assess the property, and when he went in there, it was just a visual visual inspection. He didn't go into concealed spaces. He didn't try any of the equipment or systems out. He didn't include any code compliance issues. So if the current seller made some changes to the building and it wasn't code compliant, he didn't check to see that. And in that report, it's really quite important to note that the costs that they are provided, the cost of fixing the building up, were just probable costs. They should, and in the report it specifically says they should be used as preliminary budgets only, and the prices to remedy the deficiencies and deferred maintenance may vary significantly from our suggested budget. So a lot of emphasis was placed on this number, but it should not have been because it was just a visual inspection. And I'd like to point out that that has occurred again in time with other projects like the Pony Barn. I brought that up when I stood here and talked about the Pony Barn. It was another visual inspection only. So I would suggest if you're going to take projects and have them looked at by engineers, maybe certain ones you do a visual inspection and others you actually do a little bit more in depth, because I felt that was really lacking. The other thing I wanted to point out, this is taken from your construction contractor. He specifically wrote in his original contract that he was not going to be held responsible or liable. He said there's obvious signs of rotted loading bear beams, joists, and roof beams that pose potential safety issues and building damages. Any repairs needed in result of weak rotted support structures will be at Reston Association's expense. That was above and beyond what he was already contracted to do. That was like a disclaimer that was in his original contract. Anything else there? No?
So the other area that we looked at after we kind of broke up the meeting world was that the contracts for us were an issue. First of all, I think that's you, the next one.
Yeah. Yeah, we weren't sure who drafted all of them, who reviewed them, if they were vetted in committees, if they were presented to the board in executive session. We weren't sure. The first point we want to make is that Stone Turn reported incorrectly that the CEO and the property owner signed the purchase contract before the February 26th board meeting. And I wanted to point out that that's not correct. It looks like that because of the way it's dated, but I have seen the email and the email traffic, and I assure you that Kate had like backdated it. She shared it with the board, and then it was after that that she sent it back to the seller. So she had dated it, I think, the day prior. I think it's the 25th, but she hadn't signed it. And I just want you, I saw it, so I just want you to know that that was not correct what they reported.
It went before the board first.
It did. It went before the board first, so that was not accurate in the Stone Turn report. Number two, the purchase contract included a study period, by which time RA was supposed to have obtained repair costs and undergone a covenants inspection. So you saw, we already shared with you the engineer report from Criterium. But that report came in, and it only provided a 2.5-week window. That's not a very long period of time in which RA was supposed to obtain all of these estimates. And this is where that accelerated timeline that we had to, get this all done by a certain time actually was a negative for RA. Because not all the estimate and repairs were obtained, we were only provided, or could only cover one contractor estimate. The covenants inspection for the property actually occurred after the sale in July. And it also had this conflicting clause which concerned us, which said that if the buyer fails to provide seller with a notice of termination during the study period, that would be April 24th, then the buyer shall be deemed to have elected to proceed to closing. And we found that was very problematic to have conflicting language in a contract.
Because it was conditional on the referendum. So you had one clause saying it's conditional on the referendum, and you had another clause in the study period saying that if you don't say anything, you're just going to closing. So that for us was like,
Another contract back, the general contractor's exterior renovation contract, it didn't correlate with the escrow agreement. So the escrow agreement says, okay, the owner's going to give you $275,000 to cover these things, and these things are listed here on the right. And then you had the original contract for the contractor construction, but because you didn't seem to have like the same person who was checking those, and it resulted in items that were agreed to be paid for by the escrow account, but never were. So the HVAC, which was agreed to be paid for, was completed later, but it wasn't using escrow funds, and the paving never even occurred. And of course, the corrections of any restrictive covenants, you wouldn't know because that didn't even come in until after the purchase was already been finalized. And this, I had to bring it up because this drives me crazy. The paving repairs were mentioned in the engineer report. They were mentioned even before the purchase ever occurred. I think you had the two attorneys for the seller and RA bickering about, are you ever going to cover these costs? And I want you to pay for the paving. So this goes back before anything ever occurred. And it never happened. It was in the escrow amount. We paid for it. They were supposed to have the parking lot paved, and it never happened. And the parking lot looks like it does on the right to this day. Untouched. Here's something else that was very interesting. Some contractors began working before contracts were signed, and this for me is extremely problematic. So Cressa, which is the project manager, began working before it submitted a proposal on October 28th. That wasn't signed until November. But just pay attention. So they signed their contract in November. In April of 2015, like 7 months before, they provide a construction bid to RA during the study period. In August, they provide RFP and architects for RA. They assist in the selection of the general contractor before October 21. And RA reports in January that they have no record for any payment to them in 2015 outside of the escrow. So how is it possible that they're working for 7 months and we have no record of any payment? I cannot figure it out. The escrow payments account for work conducted by Cressa in October and November, but not prior. So there's a 7-month window in which I can't figure it out. The next is the interior design company. So they attended the first working group meeting on October 12th, And their proposal was not signed until the 28th. So again, they're attending a meeting and they're not contracted. And they did a big presentation with, I don't know, some big drawing. Oh, we're still going. All right. Again, there were duplication in the contracts for project management. So Jill and I went through all the contracts and we found duplication. So you have the general contractor who's paid $16,500 for the exterior and $33,000 for the interior. You had Cressa being paid $45,000 to do some of the same things. And then you had another company coming in to do another project meeting. So you have everyone's kind of being, it looks like duplication to me, a lot of it. Then you had someone who was actually hired to do lead certification for $10,000. It'll come back. Oh, okay. For $10,000, and I don't know, maybe there was a dispute, I'm not sure. But then we found another contract for someone for $20,000. Now I will tell you the $10,000 eventually was taken away and reduced to $1,500. But somehow we went from a $10,000 contract for leads, and it escalated to $20,000.
And these are all soft costs. These are not, you didn't get your pavement paved. These are all soft costs to multiple contractors. And I would rather have the parking lot paved.
I'll be your project manager.
Well, you have to have 3 different project managers.
Oh, I can wear many hats.
She could do it.
Another very concerning fact is that, you want to do that one?
We requested contracts because we were saying, okay, what is their scope of work, right? It's like if you look at someone's contract, you can figure out what are they supposed to be doing. Are they out of scope of work? Do we pay them beyond their scope of work? Are they in their scope of work? But we can't find contracts for our general counsel or land use attorney for this specific transaction. The general contractor, the contract for the interior, and the project manager, there's no contract. So it's hard to say they're out of their scope because there's no scope defined. And you know, our big thing with contracts is they have to be in place before people start working. They have to be in our favor. As members, that's what I would like. They'd like to be in our favor, and that they should be on the premises so that we understand what their scope is, what their statement of work is.
This is about title objections. And I have to say this is a little bit of a gray area for us because we are not sure that they were cleared or when they were cleared. Kate was told at some point that there was no issue with the title, but in looking at when that statement was made and looking at the list of what needed to be done, it was incredible. The list was lengthy of all the things that needed to be done to clear that title. At least one item, a certificate of satisfaction for release of a deed of trust of a line of credit, it was not obtained until the day after closing. I think that's very significant. Additionally, the title company required that the restrictive covenants had not been violated, but you have to keep in mind that the First Amendment to the contract agreed that no liens would be placed on the property and the seller had no duty to remediate those should anything be found. So it's not clear to me how that was remedied with the title company's requirements, but it appears to have been removed.
Well, for us, the title objection letter was super long. And when they went to, so there was a lot of things that had to be cleared. And a lot of, we paid lawyers to do that, right? Because we wanted to get it to clear title. And that makes sense to me. But what I don't see is closeout of the objections. And that's what we were asking for. If people had objections, they could come back and put a claim against our property. I would really like to know that. And I don't see it. And I don't know, if there's clear title and if there's an insurance, if we have title insurance, we don't know. So it's something, it would be helpful. It would be helpful for the association, the board, to ask. But we couldn't find the paper trail, and you see our paper trail.
Yeah, it's lengthy. I would suggest that somebody pursue that a little bit further. I'm not going to be doing that. I'm not planning on it. The one thing I will tell you is that we did ask for and did not receive the seller's response to title objections. And in that section of the contract, there's certain timelines. And if you do not meet them, you basically forego your ability to clear your title. And so for us, that was quite concerning because we're just not confident. And it also is just concerning when you have someone telling your CFO, no big deal. But it's a big deal to me if you didn't clear something until after closing. Oh, it's me. All right. Now we're into construction. The construction fact number one, the contractor was a former employee of the project manager, and this for me is quite significant, and pay close attention. So the general contractor, it turns out that he was a former employee of Cressa. He was actually working for Cressa, the project manager, during the time that we were going to be purchasing this building, and until about a month before the property was purchased. It appears to me that it has been his first company project, and that the project manager did not make a formal request for bids. They contracted, that says they contracted firms directly who were available to perform work on the property.
So he worked for Cressa. He came off of Cressa, opened his own firm, and we gave him his first contract. And we don't see an RFP. So
no bid. This was a no bid contract, effectively.
No, it's no bid.
And he, that's what we see. It could be paperwork that we don't see. We don't know.
I don't know. It's concerning for sure.
So the general contractor, you're not finding that they put a bid?
No, so he couldn't have put a bid because he was working for them. So he was working for them and he was their employee. He did not leave their employment until July. So he leaves in July in June, and then the property is purchased in July. But you have to realize the bids occurred or came in, at least the Winmar bid, which came in during the study period, was in April. But he was employed by them in April. So I don't know. We didn't find any. I'll tell you. Let's just say that we didn't find anything like that. Yeah. Okay. So that's another one. And this is a stone turn finding, and I think everyone knows that there was no contract that could be found for the interior work. It's thought that they just continued on with that same contract that we were just talking about. They just assumed that he would just continue on. This is another fact which came forward, I think, by Stone Turn, but I just wanted to point this out. So it appears that the general contractor was awarded the internal contract or construction contract for $584,283, which was in excess of the pro forma in early December. We're not clear who signed the missing or the contract because it's missing. But what I wanted to point out is that the contractor posted on his Facebook page, "Hey, I got the contract." We found a lien that Stone Turn provided that he put again. He provided it was a lien that was filed or submitted to RA for that same price of $584,283. We found a budget with that sum on it. The first invoices showed that sum, so it clearly means or indicates that there was a contract for that sum to us.
We tried to verify what we thought with paper. Every single time we thought something, we went back and looked, and we tried to verify it. So anything that we're saying is verified by not one source. It's usually verified by 2 or 3 sources. That happened to be his Facebook page. So
it's a pretty good source.
Yeah. This is neat. So it was not until March of 2016 when the board was informed the cost exceeded $584,000, and it was not till late May when it became clear that there were significant cost overruns. Because I think in between there, they asked him to rework the budget to try to get that down. But remember what we had said in the fact sheet to all of us members was $259. So for us, we were like, where did that number come from? And there was just not a lot of information on where that number came from. But it wasn't, we didn't see formal documentation. Again, it could be executive session. We don't know that price was discussed, $584,000, not until May. So on this one, on March 7th, on 2016, the CEO, reported the overrun to the board operating committee, and then after that, the board, it kind of changed. That's what we were saying. It changed. They kind of adjusted, bring it down, and then, the May 3rd, 2016, the general contractor project meeting minutes state that the March and April invoices are going to be submitted after the meeting. So the board meets, but you didn't know about it because they submitted the invoices afterwards. And you know, it's hard for you guys to keep track. I mean, it took us hours and hours and hours to do this. It's like, and you have regular stuff. This is only one project, so I don't know how you would have known. I mean, I don't know. It's very hard to track, and it has to be spelled out on paper and reported against the same source every week or every month, so you know what changed. So when things change. Yes, you ask the questions and you read the documents. It's very important. But by the time the board approved $430,000 to cover the additional cost overruns, the majority of the work was already complete because you saw him in his Facebook page working.
I just wanted to go back to this really quickly. So when the working group came forward with this interior renovations, they stood here and they gave this presentation about all these things that's going to happen. And everyone on the board was like, oh, that's awesome, that's wonderful. But nobody had a budget. And so that was concerning to me. I think anytime a presentation's done, you should always be thinking number. You know, they were talking about all these wonderful things that were going to happen, but nobody asked. Not one person said, how much might that cost?
Now we're finally at the conclusion. You'll be so happy. The four major issues that directly impacted the Tetra purchase and remain problematic today that we have continued to see, and the board knows that we email them when we see something. The contract staff that we have, we trust them, which is good, but we rely on them too much, and that's our opinion, strictly our opinion. And it has they have a lot of latitude over our decisions as an association. And I'm part of the association, and you're part. And I mean, Erwin spoke up about this project from the very beginning, like 6 times, 7 times, and he wasn't listened to. You know, our contracted staff is listened to more than our members are, and that has to change. You know, if we have expert members in our ranks, we should be listening to them. And members, if you are experts, sit on a committee because we need you. So that's, for me, don't bulldoze your members. When they take the time to come to a meeting and talk, listen to them and process what they're saying. It's very hard as a member to stand up and have you guys, not you personally, but to have the board say, thank you very much for coming. And I never hear from you again. It's like we're raising critical issues here. So there's the other issue is that the board's not provided enough information in a timely manner. You're given a lot of pros. This project's great. This program's great. This is great. This is great. You're not given the risks. And we've seen that time and time again. You're given the pros. You're not given the cons. You're not given the risks. And you're not giving an opposing view ever. You know, who would be against that project? Who, you know, how can we do this better? Major decisions that they're not analyzed. You don't bump them back to your committees. You know, we have really good people on our fiscal committee, and we, you know, I can only speak for that because that's where I sit, but we can analyze your financial stuff. We can see if it makes sense. We have good people. And I know on the internal controls, Robert is really working so hard to get, you know, really good procurement policies and, you know, all the whistleblower, and we're seeing all these policies come through. We just have to take the lessons learned from the lake house and build them in. Because it's a way to prevent us from making some of these same mistakes on our future projects. You know, and this is going to sound really harsh to the board, and I'm really sorry, but I don't know how you pushed a $2.6 million project through in 4 or 5 months, and you can't pass a conflict of interest policy in 4 years. I struggle with that incredibly. It's essential. You wouldn't have had the problem with your contractor. They would have had to reveal their relationships. You would have, any programs that you had, you would have known who was benefiting. It's, as a member, that conflict of interest should be your #1 priority. It costs us money. And I think that was, you know, that was it. But for us, it's like, we know we need contract staff, we know we need help, we know we need guidance, but just like the board's in charge, the members are part of it, the committees should be leaned on. You know, we're leaning so much on our contract staff.
So we have a couple suggestions, and so we have to keep in mind, we're coming a year after Stone Turn, so we're 1 year. So thinking back, okay, a year from last year, you know, what have you done in this past year? And I'm going to show you some things that we found, and you can maybe say they were accomplished, or maybe they weren't. Number one, invoices should be detailed. So this is an invoice, and you might not be able to see it, but it's on the right, and it comes from the time of the purchase. It's an invoice from Cresa. The invoice is not detailed. It basically just says, you know, pay $6,429. It doesn't tell you what they did, doesn't tell you what they spent time on, nothing. And we would suggest, if you haven't already, that you'll need to make sure that your invoices matches your contract and your deliverables. Staff can't cross-check this, we couldn't, against the project manager's contract, nor the construction contractor's contract or construction contractor notes to verify what they did. Okay, so and this is April 2015. So this is the April 2015 contract, or 2017 contract for Cresa. This is for the Central Services Facility. This comes out of their contract. So look at the payment terms. It says each invoice must set forth the following data: name of consultant, invoice number, invoice date, performance or period of performance of work performed, and approved expenses. Again, you don't have to say what you did. I mean, I think that's crazy. I think that should be rewritten tomorrow.
She's tasking everybody.
As stated, RA has no record of any payment to Cresa prior to its October 2015 invoice. And as I said, it provided assistance from at least April 2015 to November, which is roughly, or October, I should say October there, roughly about 7 months before they signed a contract. I suggest someone look into it. Oh, it's me again. Okay. RA's staff and board should be aware that there is a conflicting representations clause in your land use attorney's contract. I don't know if any of you have ever looked at that contract, but in it, it basically says that that you consent that they can represent other clients in other matters directly adverse to you. We felt that the staff and board should be aware of this clause. RA has signed off in numerous contracts stating it recognizes that the attorney represents other clients. We feel that RA should not provide like a blanket waiver in advance, but consider entering into arrangements whereby it approves each matter as it arises.
Can I ask a question? Do you have a sense of track of who reviewed it on behalf of
No. So this would allow RA to consider conflicts. I think it would be something worth considering.
I gotta ask, is that contract with the firm or with the individual? Because you can't keep the firm from, if they have.
No, it would be the
other people.
individual.
This contract was with the individual? No, it's
I believe so.
No.
You think with the firm?
If you know what, if for me, if you want to put that clause in there, then can you at least tell me where the adverse representation is?
It's not unusual, provided that there's another bit of it that states that should a real or perceived conflict exist in a future statement of work.
You certainly did,
yeah. I'll tell you what. We found this. We don't know if you know it exists. We're letting you know it exists. Yeah. You can pursue it how you want to pursue it. I just think it's something to keep in mind because you're utilizing these people and you know they're representing other people as well. And this is kind of the same in line with that. So your legal billing, I'm just going to talk about this very briefly. The legal billing for your land use attorney initially used to go to your CEO, Milton Matthews. It went directly to him. And no, I take that back. It went to Mr. Chadwick. So it used to be sent to your office. You would review it for him. And then when Kate came on as CEO, and this is nothing against Kate, I don't know if it happened because you wanted it to happen or if it happened just because. It went from being billed and sent to you to being billed and sent to you for your review. And what we would suggest, because it's done this way often in other companies, is that the legal billing, again, go back to the general counsel for review before it's paid.
First, you have to have a contract and a scope of work and what they're supposed to do.
We also, this is a bit of a trick. So Stone Turn said this too, and I think you hear this a lot. There should be documentation of discussions and decisions made, or discussions had and decisions made in executive session. And they need to be, and RA needs to clearly define the rules of executive session. I'm going to tell you just briefly how this came about for me. So I was looking to see when our land use council was hired. And so I went digging. RA could not find a contract, and I went digging around in all the board minutes. And I see, hey, guess what? In this board minute from March 28, 2013, they went in executive session, and they discussed contractual services for advice reporting on land use. Okay, they come out of executive session, nothing is said, nothing. And so I'm like, well, what did they decide to do? Well, I lo and behold, I then asked for all the billing, and I find out that he started working 2 months later. So when was he hired? And no one said anything. We couldn't find anything. So that's just one example of your members are going back and looking, and they can't find out anything. We don't know. No one can remember maybe what was even said, and even if they hired the guy.
That is a huge problem, that your board members cannot remember what happened in the executive session, and I believe that. I believe they cannot remember what happened 3 years ago.
It's a 3-hour session and ended 1 in the morning, so, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Right.
It's gonna happen at 5 at night.
Someone in there, you know, if you wanna claim the notes as confidential and not share them with people unless, you know, some certain requirements, but it's not in the interest of the association to not know what happened 3 years ago.
So, but then go back to that. So I see billing from 2 months later, so he starts billing 2 months after this meeting, no contract. There's no contract, I couldn't find a contract. So what did it say? So that kind of ties into, we can't find a contract for the land use attorney for this specific transaction.
So to be clear, we have contracts, but there's no statement of work or task orders
Sometimes,
for this work.
there's not consistency.
Okay, so we have multiple
Sometimes there's no
contracts?
contracts. Sometimes there's a contract that's loosely written so that your scope is broad so that you can hire
Send
the
an
people
email?
use it for a lot of things.
We could not find a contract for general counsel. We could not find a contract for the land use attorney for the Tetra purchase that covered that. I don't know how it was
We requested
interpreted.
that.
We could not find a contract for Cressa for the months before that they were working when we couldn't find any invoices that were, it looked like they were doing pro bono work.
It's not that we're looking in your files, it's that we requested them. And it was, we cannot, Reston did not give them to us, that's what I'll say. So it's for us, it's problematic. And the other thing that for me was super problematic is that we mapped who was involved in the decision we mapped who was involved in the decisions for this project. And people that Stone Turn said were not central to the decision were clearly central to the decision. And that bothered me a lot. And I really felt that Stone Turn tried. And I felt, OSEP, perfect example. Central to the decision, central to the project, never interviewed. I mean.
The CFO was never interviewed.
CFO was never interviewed.
We're talking about the CFO who resigned.
Who resigned.
Yeah. I mean, you had critical people in that, that were involved in this that Stone Turn did not interview, or they declined to be interviewed. And if people are declining to be interviewed, then I as a member, I'm like, if you're part of my association, you're part of us, and you're part of the decision to purchase something that huge, we should be making things clear. You should be transparent. That was my biggest thing that bothered me about Stone Turn's report, because I think they did a very good job in the time that they had. That they either didn't interview people or people declined to be interviewed, and it's something we should have requested from them. Who did you ask to be interviewed and decline? Because that's not in our interest.
This is something that Stone Turn mentioned as well, that we feel the Reston Association deed should be revised with regard to contract signing authority, or it should be made clear, or we should have more checks and balances with regard to contract signing.
I would add your CFO to your contract signing, because if you're committing any money to anything, then your CFO should know if it's in the budget, they should know if it's approved, and they should know when it's over. And if your CFO is not part of your contract approval process, then we have no hope of managing our budget.
Assuming we bring counsel in-house, you would also include them?
I would include them.
Julie, we can't hear you.
The process will have the in-house counsel, that's what
I would include them.
when we get down.
They asked if we brought in in-house counsel, would you include them in the decision making? And I would say your CFO, your in-house counsel, your CEO, Your board should be appraised when you're committing the assets of the association to something, the board should know. To have outside counsel know more about your contract and your commitments of finances than your board is to me a problem. I think we're done.
We're done.
Do
Thank you
have
so much for your time.
Actually, I have a question for you. In all of the work that you did you find any specific conflicts of interest with any of the players?
Well, I didn't like the Lake Newport residents. I didn't like that at all. Yeah, I didn't like the clause on the Lake Newport residents. I didn't like that mention in there because for me, if we're paying somebody, then they should be representing us. And I know those residents are part of our membership, and so it's, there's some gray area there, but, it's like, in my mind as a member, I'm wondering, are we using public funds to help a certain sect of our membership without like really vetting that whole thing? So that was like, I felt like that was questionable. OSETH and CRESA for me that really jumped out to me. I felt like I don't think our project manager should be awarding a contract to somebody they knew yesterday. That was a big conflict for me. Is there any others that you?
I'd have to really think about it, but let me give that some thought.
Yeah, if you could, because I think that would really help us.
For me, it's appearance, and if you guys don't have a policy to say appearance, if you do not have a policy that says, if you have membership, what's creating doubt in the members is that when they're telling you some of this stuff and it's not being addressed, and you're saying, well, there's not really a conflict of interest per our policy, which is exactly what Stone Turn said, the appearance is hurting you more than you know.
Right, so you just declare the perception.
Yes.
And you deal with the perception.
Correct.
And that was never done, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Yeah.
So Jill and Moira, thank you for all the hard work. I mean, I know this was thousands of hours probably over the course of 18 months or so. And I mean, just your analysis is, I'm blown away. So I hope that we can consume all of this and think about all this. And I know we'll have more questions, so hopefully you'll agree to maybe come back and talk to us again.
No, you're done.
I'm done.
I hope we
Well, we may.
What are we getting out of all this, all the documents? Which ones are we getting, which ones?
We need to really think
Can
about
you
it.
think
Look, I'm
about
gonna
that?
tell you one thing though. You see all this?
Right.
All this was obtained either through Stone Turn, through county offices, through asking RA for it. This was all made available to us, and there's no reason why it couldn't have been made available to anybody. So there's nothing secret here. It was all provided, and if you wanted to do it, that you could have done the same.
Each box is an email, a posting on your website, we just map it.
Right.
Well, I just want to thank you guys. And we have a lot to think about. We can't do any more questions. We're way behind.
No questions. I just wanted to make sure that we are going to get access to this. I know you guys have built
We're going
this,
to
so,
talk about
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And second
Okay.
that, yeah. And then please make yourself.
So I
available.
suggest we take a short break.
Madam,
Can I ask a question?
Uh,
Do we know if we own the building?
Oh, that's fine.
It sounds like we're not sure that the title has been cleared. So it's something we probably ought to,
Do we have the title?
Eventually.
but
No, what happened once we paid off the loan? That was our loan. You should have
But we
got
don't know if the
title
title's-
documents. Clear.
So is it the property mortgage? The property wasn't secure.
Right, it's not a mortgage on the property. We took a personal loan out against our future income.
hello, we're trying to have a meeting, thank you. Can we take a short break?
Could I just make
We've already
one
thanked-
comment before our presenters leave? This is not a slight thing that we've been through tonight. And I want to express my deep thanks to you for your devotion to RA in this. I beg you to share your document with us, because we cannot pretend as though we did not hear this.
Correct.
But we need to carefully evaluate it. So you have put us in the position of having heard it. We need to deal with it, and we will be greatly helped if you share your document with us.
The presentation tonight?
Yeah, the slides.
Yeah.
Well, no, I would like
And
to have the
backup.
documents.
And the backup, this timeline
But
of the company.
let's take a 10-minute break and reconvene at 9:05.
Good show.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. We will continue through our agenda. We're going to begin with Anna. You're going to give us a covenants report. You're back again.
Yes, thank you, Sherry. Thank you for giving me some time to report out on my department. I'm slightly behind schedule, so I will.
Anna, could you get a little closer to the mic? It's hard to hear you.
She doesn't speak
Yeah,
big.
I'm sorry. I have a bit of a cold, so I apologize for being
Okay.
less than a practical. So I wanted to just give you an update on what we're working on.
Page 58.
So I'm just going to highlight a couple of things, the highlights that we've been working on in the department for the last several months, especially in 2017. So one of the biggest projects we undertook at the end of 2017 was to work on a 2018-2020 strategic plan. And there's actually several things on the plan that we've actually started to already work on, so we're well into that process. One of the items on our strategic plan was to be working on the digitization of our cluster standards. So we've been working on that project. We have 28 cluster books already online. That's sort of like the bookcase as it looks on our website. We, of course, have 134 books to do, and our goal is to complete all of 134 by the first quarter of 2019.
So Anna, how does a cluster update that? They just send you updated documents? Once they're approved, or you already have them?
Well, we have specifically cluster books, actual binders in the office right now, but we've been working with the clusters to actually go through the update of their standards. If they have materials or elements in their clusters where they have outdated materials, we usually work with them to find new materials that are readily available. And then in some cases, they have to submit design review applications to get approved, and so have to go through that process.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we're prioritizing this process based on those clusters that already have updated standards, and then working with the clusters to update their standards and then digitizing their clusters. And then all the members in those clusters, as well as the boards, obviously have access to the books that are on the website.
It's really cool.
This is just showing a 7-year trend on our disclosure packets that basically showing that our trend has been going up in terms of the volume and revenue. So we've had obviously an uptick in 2015, but it's been steadily going up. In this particular task, last year we assigned the processing of the disclosure packets to one staff member, which was very successful. Before it was distributed amongst several people on staff, but by assigning it to one individual, it's become much more consistent, so it's been a successful change on our staff. Next, we re-implemented our cluster walkthrough program. So in 2017, we completed 2 walkthroughs, one at Dogwood and one at Marco Cluster. And in 2018, we will be completing 3 at Birchfield Woods, Hickory Cluster, and Waterview. And this is a fairly, we've done cluster walkthroughs in the past, but the program as it stands right now is brand new. It's a very systematic process. So we did Dogwood and Marco last year based on the fact that they were 2 clusters that we really felt a need, that they really needed the walkthrough. But now we're actually starting to get requests, and the 3 that we're doing this year are actually requested by the clusters. It's a little hard to see this chart, but basically this is to show how our Covenants and Legal Committee process has improved over the last several years. Since 2014, we've changed our process in terms of how we escalate properties to Covenants Committee and Legal Committee. And we engage with the members much more closely before we escalate to Covenants and Legal to help them fix violations. And we do that much more so before we escalate, so that the numbers, based on what you see on the graph, the lines going down, is that the numbers that we've escalated to legal and governance committee have decreased. So we haven't had to escalate as many cases because we've engaged with the members before having to escalate. So where we used to have, 40, 50, 60 cases on a governance committee agenda, now it's more like 10 or 12. And legal committee, some of you have attended those committees, committee meetings. Sometimes we have, 3, 4. I think we've had at the most 5. So we really just escalate the most egregious properties. So the design review process is what we're really concentrating on now. We've improved on probably, I would say, 90% of our processes. And the design review process is where we feel we need to increase our efficiency. The volume of applications that we get is such that we feel that based on the amount of resources that we have, we need to address the process so that we can continue to meet our deed requirement and meet the members' requirements as well. So we have, again, like I've listed there, meet the requirement, meet members' expectations, and therefore work efficiency and staff resources. So this pyramid shows the level of application review. We have right now review at full board. Those are just the large projects, redevelopment and appeals from panel. And the full board is the 9 members of the design review board. Panel is reviewed by 3 members of the design review board. Consultation is reviewed by just 1 member of the design review board. And then there are some applications that can be reviewed by staff. So right now what we're seeing is that we have some deed requirements that we're starting to get. That's what you see in the red box. We're starting to get to the point that pretty soon we may not be in a position to meet the deed requirement. The first requirement in the deed is that we have to acknowledge receipt of an application from the members. So that requirement is automatically met by staff. We get an application, staff automatically replies to the member, we received your application, it's going to be processed. So then the next requirement is that we have to, the DRB, and basically it would be staff, must respond within 60 days after receipt of a completed application. And then the DRB must deliver notice of the decision within 30 days of the submission of a correctly filed application. So, and then if they don't hear, if the applicant doesn't hear within 30 days, if they submit notice to the DRB secretary and the DRB secretary doesn't get back to them, then it's granted an automatic approval. So right now we're scheduling application to the March 6th panel meeting. So we're just short of 10 days of not being able to meet those requirements. So what we're trying to do is staff has come up with some process recommendations to the design review board, and we've had conversations with them to see what we can do to improve the process so that we can, again, make the process more efficient to meet the deed requirement, as well as, still be able to process applications on a timely basis. And so what we've asked of them is to try and see if we can move the level of review further down so that there's more review done at consultation levels. It only takes 1 member of the DRB to review, and then push some more review down to staff, because those are quicker reviews. And then also one of the things that we asked for, the cluster standard applications, which we were talking about before, right now require review by the panel, which is 3 members of the DRB. And we've asked if they would consider bringing it down to consultation level, because right now there's such a big need to update the cluster standards that we feel that the clusters might be more amenable to going through a quicker review if we could make the process a little bit faster. So as of the last design review board meeting, you can see the colors there more so than you can see the elements, but those are all the different elements like decks, air conditioning, fences, windows, doors, and so on. We asked for all those elements to be moved down to a level from consultation to staff review. And what you see in green is what the design review board approved to move down to staff. The ones in orange were the ones that they are considering, and the red were the ones that they didn't approve. So we're just sort of in a, we've gotten some of what we want, not necessarily everything that we want. We've had no change. We didn't ask for any changes to panel, and full board, there's no change. So having said all that, basically where we are is that we're continuing conversations with the design review board, again, to ask for them to look at some additional improvements. We're asking them to think about possibly some changes in time for meetings and provide some additional options for the way applications are reviewed. So we have a work session with a couple of the members tomorrow. So we're still engaging in conversation to see how we can improve the process. And then, as a thank you again for approving the design review the inspector position that you approved in the budget, we're currently interviewing for that position, and I'm hoping to have that position in place by the end of February.
Good.
So,
Do you think you'll get closer to the challenge you have in not being in compliance with the deed once this person comes on board?
That person is not going to be helping with that process.
They're post-inspection.
Yeah, because they're post-inspection. But
So that's a
those
separate
definitely-
issue?
Yeah, it's a separate issue. But hopefully we'll be able to come to a compromise with the design review board. It's been sort of a long process to get them to where we need to be. We have a lot of volume with the application, and again, it's not always about adding resources. I think what we're seeing is that there's a process that can be improved, so that's what we should be looking at. So we've presented several options, and I think it's just a matter of getting them to meet us in the middle, for what we can do.
I think one of the things that came out in when we discussed it with DRB the other night was the fact that our staff today already works from a body of knowledge that they kind of call it encyclopedia, and so they can generally predict what the answer is going to be on a number of these items. And so that's kind of how we got to that list. And I think it's a matter of, it's something new for DRB, a new process, a new idea, so they want to go slow.
Yeah, the consultation level that's done by the one member is basically put together by staff. They work from an encyclopedia of decisions that have been tabulated and documented over time. But basically what they do is they put together the application and they pre-write the decision for the DRB member. And only about 2% of the time does the DRB member change the decision. So we've pretty much done the work for them. So it's really just a matter of, if we're already doing the work, it just makes sense for us to just expedite the work by just letting us do the work. But, just like you said, it's just a change in the way it's been done before. And again, if we can't get to where exactly, where we need to be, we just want to be able to get to a meeting of the minds so we can find a compromise to, again, be able to meet the deed requirement, which is the biggest, problem. And then, again, being able to process everything that's coming into the office and still meet the members' expectation, because everybody wants everything done quickly. They want to get their project done, and, they've got contractors waiting. And again, we want to be getting the applications because that means that people are following the process. If we slow down the process, then I think it would probably deter people from submitting the applications, because they're like, it takes too long, I'm not going to submit an application. So we want to keep the process moving as fast as possible, because that just means, if people think this is going much faster than I thought, then that means it's not as bad as I thought. So
And I appreciate that that you're always looking at ways to improve the process versus just asking for bodies or dollars or things, because that's the way we get better. And letting your staff help you. They're the best people to determine how you can do it better and more efficiently. And working with other teams, sometimes baby steps. but at least you're taking steps, right? So good job on that, and keep us posted how it's going, because this is great.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I have a question about one of the early steps you mentioned in your strategic planning, and that is the gathering together of the cluster book, I guess with each cluster's specific design criteria. And I'm sure I'm not the only director who hears from officers in a cluster or members of a cluster who say the DRB is too rigid on use of this material or this construction method. Is that a stage of preparing the cluster book and evaluating cluster guidelines an opportunity for dialogue between an individual cluster and Covenant staff and with the DRB to examine those questions of materials and construction methods?
Definitely. I mean, I think the first step a lot of times is when a homeowner may go to the board, if they want to replace siding, for example, or something of the sort, and, maybe the material is not readily available anymore. And a lot of times that happens with light fixtures or whatever the case may be. And so, I think sometimes too, it's, they want to, there are aging communities now and they want to update materials. So a lot of times that's why they get motivated to update the cluster standards. So more so now, and I think that's part of, when we say we're engaging with members, it's more of that sit-down meeting with the advisor and the cluster board, or the board member that's, handling that task, to really have that conversation of, what do they want to consider, what do they feel, and the advisor can give, some advice on, what do they think the design review board might approve or might not approve, and the advisor can also give them some feedback on what other clusters have submitted for, what other clusters are using, what's worked well, what is not. So I think that the advisor can give that perspective of what other clusters approvals have been, and can say you could go look at this cluster, that's what they've done, and that's what's been approved. But
It seems
been a
that
lot
in
of
itself would greatly add the overall efficiency of the process, so that individual homeowners aren't coming to the DRB, but things are kind of worked out between the clusters and the Covenant's office and the DRB in a global way rather than individual case by individual case. Am I understanding it correctly?
Yeah, it is. And then when the cluster standards, if the cluster standards are already set in place, that also minimizes the need for homeowners to have to submit applications, because if they're doing something that's within the cluster standard, then there are many things that don't require an application. So that's why we always talk to the clusters about, make sure you update your cluster standards. If a homeowner is asking for a different kind of door or a different kind of window, make sure you add that to your standards. So it facilitates the process for homeowners to make those repairs without an application. So we're really trying to but the cluster standard applications take up 30% of all the design review board panel agendas. So we want to be able to open up some of the spots for the homeowners as well, because we have a lot of those.
Good question.
Madam President, is this presentation available to us before right now?
I'm going to give two answers.
Okay.
One, it was presented to the DRB last week, slightly different format. We've condensed it a little bit. Julie was with me when Anna and I, with her staff, presented it. It is available to you in your Dropbox tonight, and this is.
Okay, so
couldn't find it.
So
I'll stop talking.
okay, so I don't want to take up the board's time. I just want to make a point. There are a couple of items in this presentation that I have questions on. They're not worth the board's time. I need to make sure I understand what I'm asking. But if we'd had it as a read ahead more than today,
Tonight,
we
I
probably
can't
could have
find
been more efficient and shared that with the board. So
I'm in
thank you.
Dropbox.
And Julie can't. No, I won't talk about my Dropbox.
No, and be happy to take, and respond to any questions. This is the first time that we've had staff present a report of this nature.
my comment applies universally, okay? I don't want us individually taking up the board's time if we can get a read ahead and understand our issues, our questions ahead of time and not take up everyone's time. So just a point of process.
Although it might be good to hear those, for the public to hear the questions that you have as well.
Well, if I'm well-grounded in my question, I'd be glad to share that with them, but if it's user error on my part, they don't need to know that.
So was this the presentation that went in at 4:48 or something? Is it the same one, right? Yeah, okay, all right, yeah. Okay.
That's
No, I didn't
all.
look at it.
Let's not blow it out of, let's just see if we can grease the wheels for everything else.
But I'm happy if you want to send me any questions. I'm happy to send them on.
If I still have questions once I get it, I'll be
Yeah.
glad to send them to you.
Thanks, Anna. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Did Eric have a question?
January 25th in that folder.
He doesn't get to ask him now. All right, so,
Get the Dropbox.
Mr. Chadwick, we're on to legislative updates.
Members of the board, the Virginia Legislative Session, the Virginia Assembly is in session. It's a long session, 60 days.
Are they doing anything good?
No.
Okay.
I have included in the board packet, hopefully you all have gotten it, a list of about 17 bills. I'm not going to go through each one of them unless you have questions on them. There are 3 that we have highlighted which we think are important for your consideration and potential action with regard to opposition. House Bill 722 has to do with the ability to use the action without a meeting under the Virginia Non-Stock Corporation Act, which, as you are aware, we have only recommended that you do in emergency situations or where you're hard-pressed to get the board together to make a decision. Obviously, most things should be done in open session, as you're doing here tonight. But this bill, surprisingly, introduced by Ken Plum on behalf of a couple of constituents, is an attempt to throw out the idea of the board being able to use the Non-Stock Corporation Act provision on action without a meeting.
So this applies to clusters too. That's the real problem.
I was gonna ask you, when you reviewed these for us, did you just look at it as a global view of Reston Association? Or was there a consideration for the differences in what Reston Association could manage and what individual clusters might run into issues with?
Both.
Okay.
Because the reality is that all of those groups, the cluster, let's take condominiums out of that when we're talking about clusters.
Yeah.
It's the cluster associations and Reston Association have the ability, because they're all incorporated under the Virginia Non-Stock Act, which allows for boards to take action without a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it easier sometimes in an emergency situation or a hard case situation where the board needs, and the only way that you can take that action is by getting 100% written consent from all of the board members. So it has to be something that everybody thinks is important. Otherwise, you have to go back to the board meeting situation. And every one of those also has the open meeting requirements under the Virginia Property Owners Association Act, where they're supposed to be meeting in open session to make these types of decisions. And the Virginia Common Interest Community Board and the ombudsman down in Richmond will come after them if they're not doing that.
Right.
So this is just, it's a tool. We have a tool to use as a board. This legislation would take that away, and I'm just recommending that we not approve and that we basically oppose that bill.
My question wasn't for that specific bill, it was for all of these.
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Okay, so for all of them, there was a consideration of like, you've got 60 townhomes and there's some things that are just more challenging.
It's a tool for that 5-member board as it is a tool for this 9-member board.
And are there just out of curiosity, because I think this is a condensed list of the legislation.
It's included as a full.
This is the only thing that the VLAC is looking at right now.
No.
These items. There are
All of 17
They're all
bills.
Yeah, they're all there.
Attached.
These are the 3 you want us to
Three we care
oppose.
about.
These are the ones that I've suggested to the board that they might want to consider opposing and go on record in that regard for the purposes I've discussed.
Can you tell us about House Bill 1040?
Yes, I would be more than happy to do that. This is a bill that's entered in by Delegate Fowler, a new member who apparently has many issues with her community association.
Apparently.
Clearly.
I'm wondering if Ken's having trouble with his cluster from the first one. I mean,
No, I don't think he is. regardless of that, and we can talk offline about that later.
Yeah.
The reality here is that this one would basically interfere or intercede in the internal workings of the association, dictating to you that any complaint that you got that, or any letter of complaining about one thing or the other, has to be responded to point by point. And I could foresee a situation, I mean, obviously, boards need to
Drag us
consider
to a stop.
how they're going to do it, but you get one member out there who is incensed about something, they're going to continue asking the question over and over, and you're going to have to respond over and over again to those complaints.
Think of a reason.
Kind of like the one gentleman who lives along the Potomac with the 6,000 complaints about noise from the airport. We'd have to answer every one of those 6,000.
So that's my suggestion there. Senate Bill 707 is introduced by Senator Suravel, who also has, from time to time, introduced other bills dealing with community associations. This one basically would preempt any restriction on commercial use unless the commercial use is expressly identified. For instance, if you read this bill as it's written, and we've tried to work with him through the Virginia Legislative Action Committee to get him to amend his so that it wouldn't be so restrictive. If a person wanted to open a barber shop next to you, and just pretend that that's an option, that unless your document said that no barber shops within the community, you couldn't enforce that. They'd be able to do that. Reston, for instance, has a non-residential use provision which talks about residential real property shall be used only for residential purposes and such accessory uses and home occupations as permitted, so on and so forth. So that general concept would not be sufficient to overcome this statutory provision, which requires that the occupation or use be expressly referenced in the declaration.
So we'd have to have a tome of the things that you can't do.
But it would have to be in your recorded documents.
Right, which is one thing for a community like us.
We're
It's
opposed to that.
horrific for a cluster.
Yes.
That's silly.
Okay.
That's.
The NAICS code, yeah.
Right.
So we're recommending that you oppose that one as well.
I'm prepared to make a motion, and I do point out that you have House Bill 733, that should be 722. I move to oppose the following bills as drafted, currently pending before the Virginia Assembly: House Bill 722, House Bill 1040, and Senate Bill 707.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Does anybody have any other questions on any of the other bills? I will keep you updated. The first bills look like they're coming up next Monday, the 29th, and we'll keep you updated periodically.
Have we
What does
engaged our
what does
local?
opposed mean? Do we write a letter?
706, can I ask a question on 706?
Who goes on record?
706?
Yeah.
I don't see a 706.
SB 706.
Senate bill, okay.
So we have a reserve study that I think.
Before you go any further, let me tell you that we think we've got an agreement on these two,
Okay.
where they're going to go into the Virginia Housing Study Commission next year, so that they'll come off and they won't be up before the legislature at this
All
point.
right, good. Good, thanks.
But if you have a specific one, I'll be glad to answer it at some point.
No, that can be a tricky one.
Just briefly, have we engaged our local representative who's proposing bills that are
Go to his house?
problematic for, a par 5 from him, I'll visit, but, I mean, have we engaged him? I mean.
You're talking about Delga Plum?
Yes.
Yes, I have called him and we've talked, and he understood where we were coming from. And for various reasons, he felt he was compelled to deal with putting this bill in, but there's a difference between.
Putting it in and supporting it?
Yeah, thank you. So he was very cooperative, he was very understanding, he understood what our issues and concerns were, especially for Reston Association, and he is working with us in that regard.
Especially the clusters. I mean, as a former cluster president, I mean, we wouldn't have functioned. I mean, sometimes you just can't find a quorum, and you have to make some, time-sensitive decisions on cluster business, and it's 5 emails, yes, and go do it.
Yep.
Okay, any other thoughts on or questions around the legislative update? Okay.
Madam President, I move that the board go into executive session for discussion of land use matters and personnel matters.
And the item that we move from consent? calendar? Is that to be an executive session, or are we going to address that before?
Why don't we do that before?
May I? It was my understanding that the request was that it be taken up after the election. Did I mishear that?
I don't
That
think we
was
took a
the,
vote on it. All you did
committee-
was pull it out of consent.
That was what I thought I heard
Yes,
was.
after
that-
the elections,
After
yes.
the election.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
After the election.
So we're just on to the motion for executive session now.
Well,
Well,
we didn't vote on whether or not it should be taken up after the election.
Okay.
We only voted to take it out of
I got you.
consent.
Out of consent calendar.
well, why don't we have that discussion now then? Before we go
I
into.
move that we take the application up after the election.
I second.
Discussion.
Discussion.
I'd like to understand why we would do that when we had, from our Bach meeting, we had general consensus from the Bach committee members to bring it to the board tonight for, as part of the consent calendar. So I guess I don't see the change, why the change in
So for me, I didn't understand that he was a candidate at the time. And I would not want to suggest to other candidates that this board is showing a preference or is elevating a candidate by placing them on a committee during the election season. Once I realized that he was intending to run and he's in the process of running, I thought the optic for that just didn't look good for us.
Yep.
That he can continue to attend meetings as a Restonian, and we can seat him if he's not elected. We can seat him on the committee after the election, and that was my thinking.
I felt that we had reviewed that in the Bach discussion, so I guess I'm a bit surprised because I felt that that had been.
No, we did not
discussed.
review the fact that he's running. I don't think we had a discussion on that.
I think we did. I think I had shared that you had asked me a question and I had said, irregardless, he had been in the process of joining or wishing to join PrAC before any decision had been made about whether or not he was going to run. So I'm
Well-
just a bit surprised.
As a member of the Bach, I remember that discussion, and you're probably characterizing that right, but I don't know that the board has to accept the Bach's opinion.
Right.
We said it was sufficient and clear enough to move forward to the board, and, we moved it to the consent calendar, and if some board members have concerns, they take it off the consent calendar, and we talk about it now.
Right, that's
So-
what we're doing.
So any other discussions from somebody you haven't heard yet? Ready to move to a vote? Can you repeat your motion? Who made the motion? Was there a motion?
It was
Yes.
moved to take up appointment of
Yeah,
John Pinkman after the.
After the elections, yes.
All those in favor of holding off until after the election for that appointment?
Aye.
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 I'm going
All
to
those
change to
opposed?
abstain.
Opposed? Abstain?
So abstain.
Abstain.
Julie abstain.
And John abstained.
2 abstentions.
Okay. We also have a motion on the table to move into executive session to
I'll
discuss.
second that.
You
Land use and personnel matters.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,